Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for being here at the Citrus and Avocado webinar. With this one, we did one earlier a couple months ago that was broad sort of horticultural topics, and this one we're focusing in a little bit more on exploring commercial production and scaling up and what that might look like in the North Bay area. And so we're going to start off with a presentation by Ben Faber with UC Cooperative Extension. We'll have about a half hour, more or less, for Q&A with Ben. So please ask him all of your questions. And if you could, feel free to put your questions in the chat. If you don't want to forget them, I have a terrible memory, so I have to write things down. Or you could just hold on to them and ask during that Q&A. But I'll be monitoring the chat, and I can try to answer some questions here and there too as I can. And so then we'll have a 10-minute break. And we'll come back for a grower panel with 4 farmers. So Rebecca Bozzelli and Ross Cannard with Seven Moons Farm in Sonoma, Robert Abbott with Abbott Ranch in Carpinteria, and Michael Sullivan with Churchill Orchard in Ojai. So very, very, very excited and grateful to have not only Ben Faber, who has many years of experience with these crops as an extension advisor, but also a diverse grower panel to talk about what these practices look like in action and considerations when it comes to commercial production. So yeah, big thank you to all our speakers and thank you all for being here. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Ben.
Yeah. So this is going to be a two-parter on avocados and citrus. And one of the hardest things to get across is how to irrigate avocados. And if you've grown apples and grapes and almonds and walnuts, and if you've grown citrus, you've got to unlearn everything. It's better to have grown spinach and then start growing avocados, because avocados, they've got this reputation of taking more water than other crops. They don't, but they take a very precise amount. And if you mess up, you're going to kill the darn trees. They're very sensitive to salinity. They're very sensitive to drought stress, and they show it. I mean, if you don't know how to irrigate avocados, you're going to have a dead tree really fast. And in fact, the first crop ever irrigated with drip irrigation was done by Don Gustafson down in San Diego in the late 60s. He went to Israel to learn how to use drip irrigation because they were planting avocados on these really, really steep slopes and using high pressure irrigation, sprinkler, and they were getting erosion, they were getting water logging, and drip really saved the young industry that was in San Diego and then along the coast. In 1965, there was about 1,800 acres of avocados planted in Orange County, which no longer has any commercial orchards left, and Los Angeles County, and then an emerging commercial production in San Diego. And then about 1975, when state water was brought in, that water from the Feather River was brought all the way down to Southern California. And then, boom, suddenly we had 90,000 acres. And it was all drip irrigation and micro sprinklers. And they were all brand new growers. They didn't know how not to grow. We were growing Valencia oranges here. They were irrigated once a month for 48 hours, flood irrigation. And so those Valencia growers started growing avocados, and they killed them within 6 months. So with that introduction, here we go. Avocados. They're called alligator pears, aguacate, palta, aguacatl, depending on where you are. And there's in the Lauraceae, the laurel family, and the only representative in California is the California laurel. But if you go to the southeast, there's probably 10 major species, and the forests from South Carolina into Florida and Mississippi and Louisiana are dominated by Lauraceae. And there's a laurel wilt disease that hit there about 15 years ago that is just wiping out parts of the forest. It's a potential insect disease combo that could hit here. We have one that's called polyphagous shothole borer that's spreading a fusarium that has a similar mechanism, and it's been pretty much confined to the San Diego, southern Los Angeles area. There's a lot of the Persea genus, and they're all over the world, and they come in all manner of shapes and color. And actually this image is of the National Avocado Park in Michoacan, and it's wild avocados that are in purple and yellow and pink and red and green and black and round and oblong and 5 pounders and 2 ounces, and I mean there's a whole range of varieties. And there's one called Styromarchia that actually grows in water. And so one of the common problems of a lot of Persea, as well as this is related to camphor and cinnamon, and they all get Phytophthora cinnamomyi. And it's water management that is critical. And the Styromarchia is in New Guinea, and it's growing in water. So there is some inherent resistance to Phytophthora cinnamomyi. But Persea americana is what we normally eat, and it's in the commercial trade. And there's 3 races: the Mexican, which has got characteristic licorice smelling leaf and it's thin skinned; the Guatemalan, which is round and has a thick skin. In fact, it's so thick skinned sometimes you need like a saw to get through it. And then the West Indian, which is the characteristic of a lot of the Florida varieties. And they're big, they're kind of sweet flavored, low oil content, and they're not cold tolerant. They don't do well in California, even in San Diego. Persea lingua is a variety that comes from Chile. It's very similar to our umbellari California laurel. The seed looks the same and is very, very sensitive to Phytophthora cinnamomyi. And Phytophthora cinnamomyi is actually a brown algae. It's not a fungus. And it got into the forests of New Zealand about 15 years ago, and it's really wiping out the kauri trees. So far, Phytophthora cinnamomyi hasn't gotten into our wild forests where we have California laurel, but it could do a number on it. It's an unusual fruit. It's one of the rare fruits that has all the amino acids a human needs. It's got vitamin C. It's got a lot of minerals and vitamins in it. And it's unusual in another way. There's a psychological symptom called the avocado illusion. So if you look up into a tree, it's hard to find the avocados because they're green, just like the leaf. So you look up there and you go, oh, there's no fruit. And then you look a lot closer and, oh my goodness, there's one, there's another. Oh, and they are green because they have chlorophyll in them. And the fruit actually photosynthesizes the way the leaf does. And the longer the fruit is on the tree, the more growth you get. And it doesn't grow by expansion with water the way most fruits do. If you irrigate an apple, it gets bigger, but it gets less sweet. If you irrigate a peach, it just gets bigger and it reduces the amount of sugar content. In avocado, it responds to day length and the time it's on the tree. And avocados, depending on the environment, can hang on a tree for up to 2 years. And so this makes it really a interest to commercial growers because you pick into the market. Okay, so if you're growing apricots, bang, it's July 15th. You'd better get that fruit off because in 2 weeks you're not going to have any fruit. It's all going to be on the ground. Whereas avocados, it sits up there in the tree unless you get a cold spell or a heat spell or winds or something like that to knock the fruit off. So it hangs in clusters like that. And the avocado flowers and flowers and flowers until it gets a fruit set. And along the coast here, it'll flower in January when we get warm weather. But if the temperatures need to be 48 hours above 55 degrees to get fruit set in Hass. And this is pretty much true of all the varieties. There's over 900 named varieties, and they're all have their quirks. But typically you need about 48 hours of, and if it drops to 40 degrees at night, which it very commonly does along the coast in Southern California, you may have pollination, movement of pollen from one flower from male to female, but unless you have continuous heat above 55, you don't get fruit set. And they alternate bear. And one reason why Hass is the dominant variety is it tends to do less alternate bearing. But I had a trial with Hass where there were some trees that consistently gave about 50 pounds of fruit. And then there were some that gave, in 5 years of the trial, it gave over 1,000 pounds of fruit. But if you have things like Fuerte, which was the old variety that was the dominant back in the 1930s and 40s, I mean, it'll go from 500 pounds of fruit to nothing the next year. So that's fairly typical of most varieties, to have a lot one year and very little the following. It's a fruit dense. It's very cold sensitive, and it tends to alternate bear. It's got a shallow root system, and this is where watering is critical. People say it takes a lot of water. Well, most tree growers, when they hear about the sensitivity of the trees, they say, oh, I have to water more. No, you water to the root zone. And typically you're looking at 18 inches to 2 feet that you're irrigating. So, if you're irrigating so it's going down to 5 feet, you're wasting a lot of water. And that's what, you hear about people saving water off suddenly with avocados. Well, they just change the frequency and the amount that they apply per irrigation. And when you over irrigate, every irrigation, this is true for all trees, you suffocate the roots. And so, judicious irrigation is really critical. So in Southern California, we grow these trees on hillsides, and that's because it has a reduced frost hazard. You get better drainage. But this is a situation that is in an area to the east of Ventura City, around Moore Park. Here's a nice, happy orchard right next to this one that's dying. So here's a nice, healthy orchard, and here's one that's dying. And this family is hanging around on weekends when we get our winds and our heat waves, and this family is off in Las Vegas. You got to pay attention to these darn things. And the weather in Southern California is erratic. It'll be cold, 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 overcast, foggy, and bang, suddenly it's 80 degrees, the wind is blowing, and you'd better be on top of an irrigation. And, the irrigations can be short, but the avocado tree that goes under water stress creates problems for insects and diseases, and they will rapidly kill a tree. Flowering habit. I don't know what it's going to be like in Sonoma, but along the coast here, we talk about the really unusual flowering habits. They tend to flower as determinate. They flower on new growth at the ends. That's determinate. And then sometimes you'll get this determinate growth, and then you'll get a second flowering that's indeterminate. So you'll actually flower as a terminal, and then you get a flush of leaves, and then you get another set of flowers. And that's because avocados are opportunistic. They will flower when the weather is right, and it may come at a different time. So I've seen flowering from January through July. The flower is a complete flower. It's got both male and female, but it's out of sync. So you'll have a male phase, so it'll come out as a male, and then it'll close and then come out as a female. And so that it encourages cross-pollination, movement of pollen from another tree or another flower to the female stage. So we get this, what's called synchronous dichogamy, di to cogamy, marriage. So it's it's out of sync. It first opens as in the A flower types, and A flower types are bacon, fuerte, um, uh, 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 mainly Mexican varieties, and then the B flower type is Hass. And so we talk about interplanting A flower types like um, Bacon and Zutano and Stewart and Anna and which are A flower types, so that they will overlap with the flowering of the female that comes along. And in point of fact, along the coast, we get a kind of a jumble occurring on a given tree. But if you move inland, which may occur in Sonoma, you'll get a more distinct flowering pattern. And having alternate flowering types might really be helpful. It certainly is the case in Riverside, which is much hotter and colder than it is in Ventura, and you get a much more distinct flowering pattern. So the A varieties are Hass, Gwen, Lamb Hass, Pinkerton, Reed, Gem. These are all the really commercial varieties. These are the ones that people really like. And then the B flower types are Bacon, Ettinger, Charwell. Actually, Charwell is a dandy piece of fruit. This is the dominant variety grown in Australia. It's a thin skin green. And unfortunately, consumers have been trained to go after Hass, which is a dark skin. So green skin is often associated with something that's immature, but a mature Charwell is dynamite. And so the actual maturity is kind of weird. It's the tree, the fruit matures on a tree, but ripens off the tree. And so we have official standards for different varieties. These are established by the Department of Food and Ag. And so it has to reach a certain dry matter content in order to be mature. So Hass, generally speaking, in Southern California is ready to go late January. And after that, you can pick anytime. As you go north, that picking date, the dry matter content changes because it's colder. So when you get to Morro Bay, which has got a planting up into Santa Cruz, you may not be able to pick until late February, March. And that's when it reaches this dry matter standard. A lot of the other varieties, you can have a mouth taste of bacon and you go, if you pick that in, bacons generally are a winter variety, but if you were to pick it in, say, September, you go, this isn't right. So when you harvest a mature fruit, it's hard. It doesn't soften. It doesn't ripen until it's off the tree. And the longer it's on the tree, the shorter the period of ripening. So if you pick Hass in January and you put it on your counter, it may not be ripe, ready to eat for about 3 weeks. But if you pick it in June or July, it will be ready in 4 to 5 days. So it softens sequentially. And you can tell an immature fruit because the stem end will soften and ripen, but the major body will stay hard. That just means, it should have stayed on the tree longer and it's never going to ripen correctly. So another reason why Hass is the dominant variety, and if you're going to start growing avocados in Sonoma, you're following Kenya and Tanzania and Dominican Republic and Indonesia and Malaysia and China, of all places, are starting to grow Hass, in Colombia and Peru and even Chile, and everyone is growing Hass now. And it ships well, it hangs on the tree. It's got a lot of, and it's a good tasting piece of fruit in its time. So right now, Hass is, I wouldn't eat it. It tastes like grass. It may pass official standards, but really around here, it's not going to taste good until April or May, and then it really hits its stride in June and July, August. Reed is a really good variety. It's a summer variety, and it's one of these other varieties that, it will produce 500 pounds of fruit year in, year out, year in, year out. It's a columnar tree. It's so you can fit more. You don't have to prune as much. It's a green skin, which is kind of like a death knell. People like black fruit. It's got more salt resistant. Hass is a really delicate tree. It doesn't like salt. It doesn't like heat. It doesn't like cold. It doesn't like waterlogging. It's really sensitive. Reed is a tough little tree. Gwen is it's a cross of Hass and some other varieties, and it's a really heavy producer. It's a smaller tree because it produces so much, um, and it would be worth trying up in Sonoma. Holiday is a smaller tree. It's a winter fruit. It's green skin. It's a pretty heavy producer. It's a good winter fruit. Wirtz is sold as little cotto and mini cotto. It's a smaller tree, small fruit, green skin, relatively heavy producer. And when I say it's a small tree, it's 12 to 15 feet high. You know, if you let a Hass go, we had some of the original commercial plantings of Hass here, and those damn things were 50 feet tall in 2000, and we had a whole lot. We had a freeze, and then we had a whole lot of rain, and those trees died. Charwell is a variety that is a great small tree, good winter fruit. And how trees grow is going to determine how much pruning you do. So Bacon and Reed are more columnar, pyramid shaped, and then trees like Hass and Gwen are they'll really get wide and big. And ideally, trees should their canopies should not be touching each other. Once they start touching, the trees start growing upwards, and all the fruit, all the flowering happens in the upper branches. If you keep the tree so that the canopy, the skirt goes to the ground, you'll have fruit up and down and throughout the canopy. That's the most productive tree. Once the canopies touch in an orchard, your fruit production goes up, and you'll lose 40 to 50% of your production. As trees get crowded, the bearing surface goes up. They shade each other. They're hunting for light. Avocados are from a rainforest, and they have one of the longest juvenility phases. They don't, if you were to plant a seed and wait for that seed to grow out and create a tree and flower, it's anywhere from 15 to 20 years before it flowers. Whereas if you take a peach tree and you plant a seed, you potentially could have flowering within 5 years. So the avocado is adapted to this shaded environment. It's designed to grow up into light, and it doesn't waste its energy on flowering until it finds light. Planting a seed like kids do. You get the seed and you put toothpicks in it and a glass of water. You're not going to see flowering on that tree for a long time. So that's why grafting is done. You're grafting to a known variety, as well as you're putting on mature wood that is going to flower within 3 to 5 years. You have to anticipate pruning, get it before it starts shading. You have to always anticipate it. You want to keep the canopy skirts as low to the ground as possible in order to keep the fruit and flowering low to the ground, so it's easy to pick. We recommend selective branch removal. We don't recommend heading, where you indiscriminately cut into a branch. We want to see thinning cuts. If you do a heading cut, you're going to get a massive regrowth. There's buds all along here, what we call latent buds, and all of those will push, and you make a cut there and you're going to have 50 branches forming, which is just going to be more work to prune. Thinning cuts, you tend not to get a lot of regrowth. And this is what happens with a heading cut. You get all this massive regrowth. Avocados, early on, they don't need a lot of nitrogen. And certainly as the trees get older, they're really efficient at scrounging for nitrogen. They create a leaf mulch that is recycled. And I did a study several years ago where I tagged leaves over a period of 2 years, and the leaves that fall off a tree are still intact after 2 years. They're skeletonized because the insects start going after it, but they are very persistent. And the avocado shallow rooting system is really adept. It gets right into those leaves and starts sucking up the nutrients. So we feed avocados as they grow into the 6th or 7th year, 8th year, 10th year, and then you can actually cut back. It's, if you start fertilizing too much, you just encourage more growth. It's like, you know, an older person eating like a teenager. You eat too much, you just get fat. Irrigation, irrigation, irrigation. And I can't emphasize irrigation in all of agriculture. It's the most important thing we do. And if you don't irrigate an avocado right, just don't. If you can't do it, just don't bother. You're just going to kill the darn tree. So it's a shallow rooted system. If you don't irrigate it enough, you're going to get leaf blight. You're going to get insects. And one of the worst insects is this invasive shot-hole borer that we've got down in Southern California. It always hits water-stressed trees. But then if you irrigate too much, you're going to get waterlogging and you're going to get Phytophthora. So it's the three bears story. You got to do it just right. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. Okay, they're really prone to fire. We grow these up against hillsides where it's cheap land. They're really prone to flooding where we grow it on flat land. Overcrowding, Phytophthora, salt, Phytophthora, freeze damage. They are very sensitive to freeze. Some of the young tree, 1 to 5, once the tree creates its own canopy down to the ground, it's more tolerant of cold. But a 1, 2, 3-year-old trees, it's very sensitive to cold, dropping down to 28 degrees for 3 or 4 hours. They're dead. They're dead all the way down to the root. So in the Central Valley around Tulare, they planted a whole lot of avocados because there's a lot more money to be made there in citrus. And they cover the trees with frost cloth. And, it's expensive, labor intensive, but they've got to get it through the winter to the stage of about year 5 when they've got a full canopy. And then they can handle, even Hass will handle 28 degrees for 3 hours. We used to get freezes here that would last 3 days. It would go down to 24 degrees and it would annihilate Hass trees unless we ran water and heat and wind machines. So Dithyarella fruit rot. Dithyarella is a decomposing fungus. It is everywhere that you have organic matter. And avocados have got a lot of organic matter. They've got these decomposing leaves. They've got Dithyarella rot. And this is a rot that goes after fruit. And so low-hanging fruit, you get a rain splash onto the fruit, and then you've got this problem. So Dithyarella will actually go after leaves as well, and it goes after water-stressed trees, and that creates leaf blight and leaf drop. Sun blotch, this is a viroid. It was spread. At one point, we had over 30 nurseries that were propagating from infected trees, and it spread sun blotch throughout the orchard. We're still dealing with that 40 years after, and sun blotch pops up, and it may be hiding there for years and years and years, and then boom. And so all the commercial orchards, all the commercial nurseries reproduce their nursery trees from tested trees for sun blotch. If you are buying trees from a fly-by-night nursery operation, somebody who's collecting their budwood from trees in neighboring orchards, I'd watch out because sun blotch is still out there. And there's several different races of sun blotch. Uh, some actually stop fruit production altogether, and some of it just produces this deformed fruit. Black streak. This is one of these cases where water stress, black streak is a fungal infection. It is it's everywhere. And if the tree goes under water stress, boom, this shows up. It's really a dramatic effect. After we've had a Santa Ana condition, a drying condition, this will show up in 2 weeks and you go, holy moly, what the heck's going on here? Once you start onto a regular, frequent, small irrigation practice, these uh, symptoms disappear. Verticillium wilt is very sensitive, and uh, if you've got workers that are out there and they're eating tomatoes and they're spitting out seed and it's infected tomatoes or peppers, almost always I've seen uh, some nightshade related uh, uh, family member in an orchard where this is spread. And it's boom, it happens. It's a fungus that clogs the xylem, and the tree goes down the first time you get a heat wave. Um, Fortunately, if you whitewash the trees, they'll come back. But a lot of tree growers will say, "Oh, the tree's gone. I'm going to cut it down." No, tree will come back, but you have to whitewash it. Root rot is worldwide. It's associated with too much water. We've had all this rain. We're going to see root rot all over the place. As soon as it starts warming up and the trees need to access water, they don't have roots. And these symptoms are going to pop up. We do have preventative measures. We have rootstocks that are resistant. Um, So a seedling, very commonly a seedling rootstock, and this is just a seed that's been planted, an avocado seed, and then grafted to Hass or Gwen or something like that. Uh, Seedlings are not resistant to root rot. We've got clonals that are grafted uh, onto a seedling, and then the seedling is removed, and then the variety is grafted onto that rootstock. Um, Proper irrigation is the first preventative. Even if you have resistant rootstocks, if you don't irrigate right, you can get phytophthora. We mound to improve drainage. We use gypsum. Gypsum is calcium sulfate. It has a mild effect on the organism. And then for commercial conventional orchards, we have phosphite. And just recently, we registered Orondus, which is a true fungicide. Phosphite is it's like a geritol. It pumps up the tree so it can resist infection. Um, Unfortunately, it's not registered for organic orchards. So if you're an organic grower, definitely you want to go into using resistant rootstocks as a first line of defense and get a handle on the irrigation. And it's as simple as using your finger. Is it wet? Is it dry? Is it time to irrigate? And when you irrigate, you want to irrigate to about 18 inches depth. So you learn what your system can do, and you learn the frequency. And the frequency, you can go to a nursery and get some of these El Cheapo $5 water meters. You just stick them in the soil. Is it wet? Is it dry? They really do work. But you have to learn how to irrigate. Don't plant a tree in a lawn. Gosh, lawns and avocados. Well, lawns and trees just don't get along. But are you irrigating to the needs of the tree or to the lawn? And a lot of times the lawn wins and the tree loses, and that's when you get root rot and the Thiorella. Perseamite. Perseamite goes to everything. It goes to peaches, and it goes to roses, and it goes to avocados. It was first introduced into avocados in San Diego about 1995, and it suddenly appeared on Santa Cruz Island, which is 18 miles off the coast. So they balloon and they're with webbing, and they spread really fast. And with a water stressed tree, it will defoliate the tree and you'll have a bare tree. And then the tree is going to sunburn. So you need to whitewash the tree in order to protect the bark from the sun. This is the kind of damage you see. And once you start seeing this amount of damage, with about 5% damage, you'll start seeing leaf drop. Avocado thrips, this goes after leaves. Avocado thrips wants young tissue, and it will move from new leaves to new fruit pretty rapidly. So one of the ways we control thrips is by kind of slowly feeding nitrogen. So you maintain a leaf flush during flowering, so it stays on the leaves. It really doesn't like fruit, and this is what it does to the fruit. It scars the fruit. It some people call them potatoes. It doesn't affect the eating quality. It makes the skin a little bit brittle, so when you slice into it, it breaks off and makes kind of a mess. But it's more aesthetic than anything. We are really reliant on biocontrol. In the bad old days when we had malathion, and we had greenhouse thrips. Greenhouse thrips was the only major problem. Greenhouse thrips would feed on fruit and on the clusters, and would cause feeding damage. And we'd go in and we spray the whole orchard. Most of the orchards here are sprayed by helicopter. On these hillsides, it's hard to get spray rigs in. And so they spray the whole hillside, and really it might be 8 or 10 trees down in this corner. And so we finally got growers to just spot spray, just spray those little areas, because there is, in an orchard that's about 5 years and older, there's a lot of biocontrol agents in there. And if you jump on perseamite or avocado thrips and spray it, you're killing all the good guys. So we really discourage spraying as much as possible, especially in avocados. There's more biocontrol agents in avocados because it's a more stable environment than you find in citrus. Polyphagous shot hole borer. Polyphagous shot hole borer showed up in San Diego, 2012, and it's now spread to most of Southern California. It goes after water stress trees. It causes some damage, but the larvae are like ants. They maintain a colony of fungus, fusarium, that they eat. So it's the insect that doesn't kill it. It's the fusarium fungus that's growing and hollowing out the tree that kills the tree eventually. And it's a water stressed tree that the shot hole borer goes to. And in San Diego, where they've got high water prices, when state water first arrived there, it was about $150 an acre foot. And now it's over $3,000 an acre foot. And they use about 4 acre feet per acre down there. So they're using $12,000 per acre worth of water. And so they're cutting corners as much as they can. And they have water stressed trees, and shot hole borer is just hunting for those water stressed trees. Up here in Ventura, we've got cheap water, fairly good quality water, and we just don't see very much of it. In fact, we had an outbreak of it about 10 years ago, and we just don't see it any longer. So it's a pest disease complex. It's an ambrosia beetle. The beetle carries the fungus. The fungus is what kills the tree eventually. And the beetle spends 95% of its time in the tree. So you've got to use a systemic insecticide to kill it. Systemic fungicides have not been very successful at controlling the fungus. It goes after not just avocado, it goes after a whole host of other tree species. I've seen it in the wild. When we get water, when we have droughts, I've seen it showing up in sycamore. Oh man, it's interesting. All along the Santa Clara River, which runs wild, it's not dammed. We had uh, California sycamores and willows going down right and left. And then as soon as it rained, boom, uh, the dead trees didn't come back, but those that were on the edge did come back. So that's avocados. Uh, Now we're going to head into citrus. Are there any burning questions about avocados? No? Ellie?
I think we can move on to citrus if you like, and then we'll have time for Q&A later too. I have some questions myself, but I'll save them for then.
Okay, well, we'll head into citrus. Okay, avocados are really a wild crop. They've only been commercialized since really since they were introduced into California in the 1910 or so. Prior to that, the fruit was wild harvested in Central America. It was eaten by humans dating back, I don't know, 2,000 years ago. They found fire pits along the coast in Costa Rica, where they've identified avocados. So it's been eaten, but they were wild produced. Citrus, on the other hand, was has been domesticated for over 4,000 years, and all citrus, with some exceptions, come from China, and at least from Southeast Asia. There is um, finger limes, which is a deciduous citrus that comes from Australia, and it's been used as a rootstock for areas that get a lot of cold. But for the most part, citrus has been uh, found in forests in China for a long time, and it's been selected for a variety of its properties. The thing about citrus is that it hybridizes very rapidly. So if you plant a lemon next to a Valencia, it's quite possible you'll have fruit that shows up if you plant that seed that is different from both parents. It also uh, creates sports, and these are spontaneous fruit or that comes off of buds that have been naturally irradiated by the sun. UV light will cause it. And we have a seedless pink lemon that my predecessor, Nick Sokovich, was notified about in Moore Park. And so on this one branch of a lemon tree, that there were fruit that were pink and seedless on a Eureka lemon tree. And so the homeowner contacted Nick, and then Nick went, "Oh my gosh, we got a seedless pink lemon. This is going to revolutionize the commercial industry." And he contacted Brokaw Nursery, and Brokaw patented it. And it really hasn't taken off. People don't care about seedless lemons, and I guess they don't care about having pink lemon juice. So it sort of got a lot of news back in 1978, and then it's gone into oblivion since then. Anyway, so all of the varieties, and there's over 10,000 varieties of citrus. These are name varieties, and some of them, like grapefruit, is a sport that came from an Oro Blanco in Jamaica in 1880 or something like that. So prior to 1880, there were no such things as grapefruit, and grapefruit is a cross of oh, what did I said Oro Blanco. It's a cross of something and a Valencia orange, and that's what created it, grapefruit. Anyway, so there's a lot of varieties out there, and in fact, there's too many. People get confused by what's out there. It's a very complex botany, and depending on which botanist you talk to, there's different systems for classifying. But in general, there's 13 genera, 1,600 species, over 10,000 commercial varieties. And just in satsumas alone, satsumas are a thin-skinned, seedless, early mandarin. Satsumas are very cold tolerant as well. So if you go to Redding or even Oregon, in fact, I saw a satsuma tree growing in a backyard in Chicago, of all places, and they're pretty darn cold tolerant. Uh, anyway, in California, you typically will harvest them August, September, October. So they're early season. But there's 20 name varieties of satsumas, so there's a lot to choose from it. And there's satsuma mandarin variety, as well as things like Arkansas and Akishiwashi. And there's a lot of Japanese varieties of satsumas because, in general, Japan is a cold country, so they've developed varieties that are cold tolerant. So here's a trick question. Which is more acid, an orange or a lemon? And I don't hear anyone saying anything, but most people say, well, of course, a lemon is more acid. But they're about the same pH. Okay. It's just that oranges have got sugar that masks the acidity. So they both have a pH of about 2.5 to 3. Both dissolve your teeth if you drink too much orange juice. Um, uh, the thing about Ventura, we grow a really dandy lemon. This was the largest lemon growing area in the world up until about 1990, when Argentina planted 100,000 acres of lemons and have now dominated the world export market as well as the industrial market. So there's a lot of products that are made from lemons, like citric acid and so on. That is a feedstock for making a lot of things, like even medications. Anyway, we grow a dandy lemon here because it doesn't get hot. An 80-degree day here, might show up, 8 or 10 days a year, but you know, it hovers around 67 degrees. And we never, we can't grow a good grapefruit here. They need the heat of the Central Valley. There's one star ruby, which is a, a grapefruit that has got some orange parentage, will do better in a coastal environment. There's a small grower in Goleta that has about 5 acres that he sells into the farmers markets, and they are reliably sweet. Whereas if you were to grow a regular marsh or mellow gold or something like that, you'd go, oh, it smells like a grapefruit, but it tastes like a lemon. Anyway, so lemons can handle cold weather, but a lot of the varieties that are reliant on sugar, they need some warm temperatures. Anyway, citrus is really complex chemical makeup, and citrus is used as you know as a medicine in itself. Citrus indica is the citron, which is what was first introduced into Europe with Marco Polo in the 1400s. So every part of the citrus, the peel, the seed, the juice, the segments, have all been used for various parts in medicines. The major species and hybrids are key lime. Oh, grapefruit. Grapefruit is a cross between pomelo and Valencia orange, first showing up in Jamaica about 1880. We've got Persian lime, which is actually not a lime, but a sour mandarin. We've got mandarins. Okay, if you hear something about tangerines, a tangerine is a mandarin, but most mandarins are not tangerines, and I'll elaborate that on later. We've got citrons, which are used in religious services and um, um, among Jews. Kumquats, my grandfather in South Dakota loved kumquats, and come wintertime, he'd ask for kumquats as his Christmas present. So I'd go out and harvest kumquats from our backyard and send it to him. You can eat everything, pop the whole thing in your mouth. It's got sweet and sour. They're really great. I'm not sure why we don't see more kumquats on the marketplace. We've got the grapefruit selections. We've got Rangpur lime, which is also a mandarin. We've got the lemons, we've got the sour oranges, and then we've got the sweet oranges, which includes all the Valencia. There's a lot of different Valencia varieties. We probably grow about 5 different Valencias in California. You go to Florida and it's dominated by Valencias, which went into the orange juice trade. Florida is a sad case. It was more than 1 million acres of primarily Valencia types. It's down to about 300,000. It's been annihilated by Wang Long Bing, HLB, citrus greening. And it's one of these weird, things that we've tried to avoid here. HLB was spread throughout. HLB is spread by Asian citrus psyllid, and infected trees were spread throughout Florida in the retail trade. Uh, the retail nurseries took these infected trees and they planted them up and down the state, and soon they were into the commercial orchards. Bang! And within 2 years, you started seeing the symptoms of Wang Long Bing, which is a discoloration of the leaves, and then it moved into the fruit, and it causes a bitter taste of the fruit, which you just can't get rid of. And then it causes fruit drop. So a combination of that plus all the hurricanes they've had really has destroyed the citrus industry. And it really has hit an industry. There used to be like 15 major plants that process oranges into juice. If you were to buy Florida orange juice, it might, a lot of times it said 100% Florida juice. No, when you grow citrus in a warm climate that doesn't get cold, it never develops color. So the orange juice would have this kind of insipid yellow color, and they'd buy California citrus because we have cold here, and cold, sweetness is developed with heat, but the color develops with cold. And so one of the major industries for the California industry was to sell juice to Florida so they could mix it with their juice and make it turn orange. Anyway, it's gone from 15 processing plants down to like 6 or 8. So it's caused a real hit to the economy there. Okay, so adding to this confusion is a lot of multiple names. So there's Bears, Tahitian, and Persian lime. They're all the same. Mexican lime, Indian lime, Coxie lime are all the same. And so you go to a retail nursery and they'll be selling West Indian or key limes right in the same retail nursery, but they're the same darn thing. And then you get the Palestinian sweet lime and Indian sweet lime, which are, they're a lime, but they're sweet. And then Rangpur lime is not a lime, but it's a mandarin, but it's sour. Then you get other things like when you go to Europe, everything is confused by the different languages. So Shamuti and Jaffa and Palestinian orange are all the same thing, but they're labeled separately. I had this experience in San Luis Obispo. There's a chain of stores that they're organic, and they would sell Hass avocado, Haas. Well, and they'd pronounce it Hass. And maybe in German you pronounce Hass as Hass, but we say Hass, and uh, the store would sell it as Haas. And I'd go in there and I'd say, "You're misspelling this, and this is illegal. You're mislabeling something which should be labeled Hass." And this went on for about 2 years. I'd go in there, I'd go up there to put on meetings and go, "It's you still haven't changed it." And I'd talk to the manager, and they'd say, "Oh, we'll change it." Finally, I wrote to the headquarters in Sacramento, and I said, "You're going to have legal action here unless you properly correct it." This is a 5-chain store, and finally, I saw here in Ventura, they finally changed it. So legally speaking, you have to sell these things as they are trademarked or labeled, and this becomes an issue. I was talking earlier to Ellie about sumo mandarin, and it's really a decopon, but the company uh, AC Farms has decided to trademark really good tasting fruits. So they've got a good tasting cara mandarin, and they've labeled it Sunshine. So they own that label, even though cara is out there. Um, uh, so it's amazing what you can do if you are first there with naming and have copyrights and good lawyers. Anyway, so these citrus hybridize pretty easily. So uh, we get completely different fruit. So a cross between an orange and a citrus reticulata, you get what's called a tangor, a tangerine orange, or citrus reticulata with the grapefruit. You get tangelo. Tangelos are great pieces of fruit, easy peeling, seedless. Um, I don't know why we don't have more tangelos on the market. When you cross a grapefruit with trifoliata, which is a rootstock, you get citrumlo rootstock and citrandrin. And then these different crosses all create different varieties of fruit. And then they form sports or chimeras. So this variegated pink seedless lemon that came from Moore Park is really a beautiful looking piece of fruit. It's also got this striping, so it's notable from the outside that it's going to be different. Um, and then there's the Buddha's hand citron, which has no juice in it at all. It's people buy it to put on their table because it has this really uh, floral odor that is permeates everything. It's really delicate, and you know a single piece of fruit's probably going to cost you $15 or $20 if you can find it. So all commercial citrus and all fruit trees, for that matter, all fruit trees are grafted, and that's because you're getting a known rootstock. So in avocado, we have basically clonal rootstocks that are resistant to root rot, and then there's one rootstock that is somewhat resistant to high pH, but there aren't a lot of other horticultural characteristics. In citrus, we have rootstocks that are resistant to salinity, to nematodes, to phytophthora, to heavy soils, to uh, gravelly soils. We've got a dwarfing rootstock. There's no dwarfing avocado rootstock. We have dwarfing scions, dwarfing varieties, but we actually have a flying dragon rootstock, and you'll see it sold as a dwarf rootstock. And I put in a flying dragon trial, Eureka Lemon on Flying Dragon, 1992, 3, 4, 5, something like that. And the trees are still about 6 feet tall. They just don't grow. A lemon tree, a Eureka lemon on a standard rootstock, will is bigger than a Valencia orange tree, or bigger than a navel orange tree. If you let a Eureka or a Lisbon lemon tree, it'll get to be 40 or 50 feet tall if you don't prune it. Um, we along the coast here, this is different from the desert in the Central Valley, but along the coast here, we'll harvest 3 to 5 times a year because we get this cold and heat, the cold and heat, and it keeps the tree flowering year round. Generally speaking, we get our major flush happening in the spring, flower flush, and then 9 months later we harvest. But then all through the summer and into the fall, you get flowering, and so consequently, we'll be harvesting 9 months after that September 15th flower. So we'll get a spring harvest as well. Whereas in the Central Valley, it's boom, it's hot, it flowers, and then you harvest 9 months later. In the desert, boom, it's hot, it flowers, and then 9 months later. So you only get one harvest. So they kind of let their trees get bigger. Along the coast, we like to keep trees small because you got to be in there all the time pruning. And we've actually cut windows into the sides of the canopy so that people can get inside the trees, because if you keep a tree small, it will flower throughout the canopy. It still gets most of its flowering on the terminals on the outside, but it'll flower on the inside. And so in order to get that fruit, people have to get in there. Well, there's thorns on lemon trees, and the pickers don't like to go in there where it's thorny. So we'll actually cut a door 2 feet wide up and down throughout the canopy so people can slip in there and get the inside canopy fruit. Otherwise, it doesn't get picked. Anyway, so we have what's called a rootstock that has certain properties, and you can look on charts and see. The issue I have here is heavy soil. It tends to promote Phytophthora citrophora. So I'll choose this rootstock that's resistant to Phytophthora, and then I'll choose the scion. And so the scion is the name variety. It's Midnight Valencia, or it's Sumo or something like that. And again, when you graft mature wood onto a rootstock, you're going to get adult wood going on there, and you're going to get earlier fruit. Generally speaking, when you go to a retail nursery, you're either given a choice between dwarf rootstock or a standard rootstock. But if you go to a commercial nursery that supplies to the trade, you'll usually have a choice of 5 to 8 different varieties depending on what your needs are. Okay, some citrus like satsumas and navel oranges are seedless inherently. They have what's called parthenocarpy. The fruit arises from actually a bud that's inside the seed. And so satsumas are reliably seedless. And then we have some like Cara mandarin. Cara mandarin is really interesting. It's in Pakistan. So we talked about, or I talked about HLB in Florida, and it turns out lemons are somewhat tolerant of HLB, Wang Long Bing or greening disease. Most of the sweet oranges are not. They're often, their fruit is infected within 2 or 3 years of the tree's infection, and oftentimes they're dead within 5 to 8 years after the infection. There's some varieties like finger limes that are totally resistant. Lemons are pretty resistant. Cara mandarin is totally resistant. And in Pakistan, and HLB showed up in China. It was called citrus greening, Wang Long Bing in Chinese. back in 1880, and they didn't know what it was caused by, and it was only identified as spread by Asian citrus psyllid about 1920 or 1930, and it wasn't identified as a bacterial infection until about 1960. So if you go to China and you order orange juice, you don't get orange juice, you get Cara mandarin. And it turns out Cara mandarin is totally resistant. And that's true if you go to Vietnam or Thailand and you are in a hotel and you get orange juice, well, you're getting mandarin juice, and that's because Cara is resistant. And Pakistan is a major exporter of juice into India, of all places, and they ship Cara mandarin juice and they sell it as orange juice. And this just adds to the confusion all around citrus. Um, oh, and then so Cara mandarin, if it's grown in a block away from other citrus, it will produce seedless fruit. There, but if you grow it near Valenches or lemons, all the lemon varieties other than that pink seedless one produce pollen that will produce seeds in a Cara mandarin if it's planted nearby. This has caused a lot of problems in the Central Valley, where some of the mandarin varieties that are sold as cuties and sweeties are prone to seediness if they're grown near seeded varieties. And growers have been fighting growers because the bees spread the pollen from the seeded varieties to the normally seedless if they're grown without pollen, but then they produce seeds. So you may buy a bag of sweeties and suddenly all the fruit's got seeds, and it's because the bees were doing their thing, spreading pollen to those normally seedless varieties. Okay, there are mandarins. Okay, so there's a lot of different mandarins. There's the Satsumas, the Mediterraneans, the King, and the common reticulata. Most of the commercialized mandarins we find, like Fairchild and King and so on, are it's not King. I'm thinking of Cara. Are Citrus reticulata. They're the easy peelers, zipper skins. There are some tangerines like Dancy that are called tangerines because they come from Tangiers, Tunisia. But they're the only real tangerines out there. They were introduced back in the 1890s, and somehow that name got spread to all mandarins. But there's a lot of diversity within the mandarins, and they're not really pixies, and they're not really tangerines. And oddly enough, the Ojai pixie growers who claim that only Ojai can grow a good pixie, and that's not true. Pixies were
Yes, it is.
were bred at UC Riverside back in the 1950s, and it's a little fruit. It's called pixie because it's a little piece of fruit. It's seedless and it's so delicious and easy to peel. And the Ojai growers got onto it, and they want to call it a tangerine, but it's not a tangerine, it's a mandarin. It doesn't come from Tangiers, it comes from Riverside. If anything, they ought to call it a Riversider. So that just adds to the confusion about citrus. So amongst the Satsumas, we have at least 20 varieties. We have Satsuma, Owari. Owari means early, and Miyagawa and Kishu. Miyagawa, we did a trial here, and we were harvesting Miyagawas in August. There was a Russian variety, I can't remember its name, and it was adapted to a colder environment. But man, it was great tasting and seedless again. Satsumas are zipper skinned and seedless, and they're early. And this is a really early variety. A lot of satsumas are not harvested till September, October. And then the common Clementine, Pixie, Ellendale, W. Murcott. W. Murcott is a really great variety. It's seedless. If it's planted as a block away from lemons, you plant it next to lemons and it's got a mouthful of seeds. And then we've got hybrids that have come out of the UC Riverside breeding program. Gold Nugget is a wonderful piece of fruit. Tango, Page, Nova. There's the Tahoe Gold and Yosemite Gold. These are all seedless, great tasting varieties that have resulted from the breeding programs. I'm just, the citrus collection, if you go to UC Riverside and type in citrus collection, it's got wonderful descriptions of all the different varieties, the flowering times, the fruiting, the size of the fruit, how they do in the Central Valley, how well they do at Riverside, how well they do along the coast. It's a great resource. So UC Riverside citrus collection, if you want to know more about the varieties. And this came about from a, a question from Wine and Food magazine that I got the other day, and they wanted to know about sumo. And I said, well, sumo is a trademark name by this AC Farms. So they found Decopon or Shiranui, which is a variety that comes out of Japan, and they copyrighted it. And it's the same piece of fruit. So if you grow a Decopon, you can't call it a sumo or you'll have a lawyer at your door. But sumos are a big piece of fruit. I've seen them as big as a big grapefruit. They're sweet, they're seedless, they're easy to peel. And if you go to Whole Foods right now, they're selling them for $4 to $5 a piece. So there's money to make. But they're being sold at all the markets now, Albertsons and Ralph's, and I don't know who's got that kind of money, because some of these other bag varieties, the cuties are equally well. It's hard to beat. Decopons are really, I mean, it's worth buying one. There's that candy bar that's out now that's got pistachio filling, called Dinuba or something like that. It's from the Middle East, and they're charging $15 for a little piece of. I haven't bought one yet, but definitely you should buy a sumo, or I've seen decopons being sold, and these are the same thing as a sumo, but they're not being grown by the company or the people that license that. So definitely try one. Then we've got the sweet oranges. Navels are winter varieties. Valenches are summer. We grow Valenches along the coast because it doesn't freeze in theory. Valenches have to sit on the tree for a longer period of time. Navels are 6 to 9 months. So they flower in the spring and then you harvest them in the wintertime. Valenches, they flower in the spring and you harvest them a year later in the summer. We've got some what are called the midnight Valencia varieties that you harvest them even later. You harvest them almost 18 months after they flower. Um, the, the, uh, the world's trade has really confused things because there's a lot of citrus grown in South Africa, Chile, especially Australia. So you can get, navels in the summertime here because it's a winter in Australia. So you'll buy winter navels in our stores in the summer. And a navel is a really good, easy piece of fruit to eat. It's what all the kids eat when they play soccer and they have the halftime. If you try and squeeze a navel to get juice out of it, you'll get a thimbleful. Whereas Valenches are loaded with juice, good tasting juice. And this wine and food editor asked me, well, what's the next glamour fruit after sumo. And I said, well, maybe Valencias. We had 100,000 acres of Valencias in this state, and we had 30,000 here in Ventura alone. And I think we're down to about 500 or 800 acres. And suddenly Valencias have become the glamour fruit. And it's because Florida has lost so much acreage. And a glass full of Valencia juice is dynamite. And it only takes two, maybe three pieces of fruit to get a good 8 to 10 ounce glass of fruit. Whereas I've got a navel orange in my backyard, and I went through about 40 pieces of fruit to get a pint of juice. So they're, navels are good, but they're not juicy. Anyway, there's Caracara navel. There's also a Caracara mandarin. So you got to be careful. There's also a pink Caracara out, and this company AC Farms has trademarked improbably pink Caracara navels, and it's just a Caracara navel that's pink, and they found it and they copyrighted it. So there's a Trevita Valencia. There's a brand new Valencia that was just, I can't remember the name, that just came out of Tulare the other day. And I don't know how many varieties we really need on the market. We're confused. Pomelo are a big fruit. Oro Blanco is a cross between grapefruit and pomelo. A true pomelo is more skin than fruit, and it's a mild tasting grapefruit. My predecessor in San Diego, Gary Bender, went around saying Star Ruby is a great piece of fruit to grow along the coast. Pomelos and grapefruit, if you grow them along the coast here, they smell like grapefruit, but they taste like lemons. They're sour as all get out. But Star Ruby is a grapefruit variety. It's pink, and it produces a really good piece of fruit along the coast. There's a grower in Goleta that's got about 5 acres that makes money hand over fist selling Star Ruby in the farmers market because they're so good. And then we get some of these specialty citrus like kaffir lime, which is used in cooking, Thai cooking, Australian finger lime, which is called caviar, citrus caviar. It's got these little locules, beads of sour fruit, sour juice. Yuzu is a really dynamite piece of fruit from Japan. Another good one is kishu, little fruit that are just loaded with sweetness. And I don't know, Americans like big, so a big sumo fruit, a big navel, and yuzus and kishus are these little things that, I think that's probably one of the problems with kumquats. They're too little. It takes too much to fill your mouth or something like that. And you have to peel too many. Pixies, same thing. They're great for little kids, but adults probably don't like them. They're a great piece of fruit. Sudachi is a fruit that's used in Japanese cooking. And a lot of sudachi is actually imported from Japan. It's kind of crazy. We could easily grow all the sudachi required by Japanese restaurants in the United States on probably 50 acres, and they'd make some serious money. Economics. Lemons are in the dirt right now. A lot of lemon growers have lost money for the last 5 years, and they're yanking them to plant avocados. Generally speaking, we need to make about 15,000 gross, $15,000 per acre gross to justify land costs, water, and labor. Sudachi, I don't know, Mike Sullivan, who's a grower, can tell us what, or maybe he doesn't want to tell us, it's a secret, how much money you can make growing sudachi. Fertilizer, avocados, you fertilize up to about 8 to 10 years, and then you can cut back because of the the recycling that goes on with the roots and the mulch. Avocado, citrus, you need to keep fertilizing. You know, you're harvesting consistently 20,000 to 30,000 pounds of fruit. And so that's exported. So you got to keep feeding because you're removing nutrients. Um, so you're looking at probably at least a pound of fruit, a pound of nitrogen, a pound of potassium per tree per year. You can do that with compost or manure, but you're putting on about 10 pounds of manure per tree. You don't fertilize new plantings. You don't fertilize new plantings of any tree because they're build up at the nursery. And I've seen damage from applying fertilizer to new roots that are pushing. So just the first year, you don't really want to fertilize new trees. If you start putting on more fertilizer than the tree takes, you create a lot of hay, as my old pomology professor said, and you just end up pruning that stuff out, and you have to prune more frequently. So really restrain yourself in especially nitrogen application. And you can cut back with older trees because then you're just really replacing the nutrients that are harvested in the fruit. You're not replacing a lot of wood and leaves and young tissue. Watering along the coast, young citrus can use about 10 gallons of water a day. As the days are shorter or cooler, you can cut back. You know, really, you need to check the soil. Citrus is not as sensitive to over or under irrigation as avocados. Again, we had Valencia growers here in the Fillmore area that irrigated once a month, whether they needed it or not. With 2 days of irrigation, they'd put on, you know, equivalent of 4 feet depth of water. You know, it's like they were drowning for 2 days, and then they'd stress for probably 2 weeks after that. Orange and mandarin trees can get to be about 18 feet. You got to leave enough room. Lemons will get to 30 feet, and I've seen bigger. In order to keep trees productive, you want to open up the centers to keep production throughout the canopy, and then bring height down so you can easily pick them. The original Washington navel, which was planted in 1880 or so, navel came from, it has a navel. It's got a little button, which is where the name comes from. But the original tree came from Brazil, and it was sent to what was the Smithsonian plant collection in Maryland, and then it was sent as a cutting to a woman by the name of Tibbetts in Riverside, and that's when the navel orange boom started, and the incredible wealth of the citrus industry started in 1880, 1890, and fruit was being sent by rail car to Washington, D.C., and New York and Chicago, and citrus growers were getting so rich. And, you know, life is harder now. Common insect problems. Well, Asian citrus psyllid is a real problem. So far, it has not been anywhere as destructive as it has been in Florida and Cuba and Dominican Republic and Colombia and so on. Brazil. We have a drier climate, and it's not as conducive to the psyllid, but we do have the psyllid in backyard trees in San Diego, Riverside, Los Angeles, Ventura, and it's causing some problems. It hasn't shown up in commercial orchards though. So silver mite, it's called silver mite because it causes a discoloration of the skin. In oranges, it's called rust mite, but it's the same mite. Citrus bud mite causes deformed fruit. This is a little insect, and it's cause some real problems. This year, bud mite, I know of growers who in lemons who have sprayed 3 to 5 times and they still can't control it. Red mite and six-spotted mite um, are they they never come under full biological control. You'll always see some problems in organic orchards. Red scale, this is a problem throughout the industry in the Central Valley along the coast. Purple scale, I've aphids, mealybugs, whitefly. This year we saw a lot of whitefly, and it causes this fungus to grow on the surface. But if you clean that up, if it rains and this sooty mold clears out, you'll find that there'll be yellow patches underneath this, and it looks spotty, just the way HLB looks. And people get excited. Oh my God, I've got HLB, and it turns out it was just whitefly feeding. And then brown garden snail. And in wet years, boy, this can be a real problem. They climb up the trunks and get into the trees and feed off the fruit. Most of the insect pests, mealybug, aphids, scale are controlled by Argentine ant. And if you control Argentine ant, you can control probably 80% of the insect pests. Right now, we're working on a control for Argentine ant that uses a algae gelatin that's impregnated with a variety of pesticides that the Argentine ant collects. It's spread on the ground. You can use boric acid, which is an organically accepted material. The Argentine ant collects the gel loaded with the pesticide, takes it back to the nest, and boom, they're dead after about 2 to 3 weeks. And then, in theory, most of your problems, insect problems, go away. Tanglefoot can be used. You put a latex paint down first, and then you put the tanglefoot down around that. So, if you're dealing with 1 to 2 or 3 acres, this is entirely feasible. In a couple hours, you can do an acre, with the white paint, and then come back through after it's dried and put the tanglefoot down. And as long as you keep dust down, that tanglefoot's pretty effective for at least 3 months. Leaf miner has been a problem that showed up here. It showed up in Australia years ago, and somehow we got it in here about 15 years ago. And it's aesthetically disturbing. On a 1 to 2 year old tree, you'll completely defoliate it, but we tell growers, don't worry about it if you've got mature trees. The tree, it's a lepidopteran pest that flies in late summer, early fall. So you can usually get a good flush of leaves in the spring, and that'll carry a mature tree through any defoliation you get. So, some of these things we just say, just don't worry about it unless it gets out of hand. There's kind of a threshold for all of them before you want to think of spraying. Diaprepes root weevil. This is an issue that's showed up in Orange and LA and San Diego counties. It's shown up primarily in ornamental citrus. Oh, and it actually goes after a lot of landscape trees too. And the larval stage eats away at the roots. There are some pesticides that you can use that are soil applied. There are some parasitic nematodes that if you flood the ground with the nematodes, it can control them. But if you've got a large acreage that it's affecting, normally, these things they affect 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 trees in an area. And if you can control that, you can knock it back. You don't have to worry about hitting the whole orchard. Phytophthora root rot. This is not the same as the root rot fungus that goes after avocados. And this is one of the things that we do. We do crop rotation. So, you know, Phytophthora cinnamomum builds up in an avocado orchard, and if you switch to, you know, citrus, you know, it's not prone to cinnamomum, but it's prone to Phytophthora citrophtera, which causes a crown rot, root rot, and it also causes a fruit rot. And then you might switch to avocados after that gets out of hand. Uh, but this is, a standard practice for dealing with it. Is we do have pesticides to treat it. We don't have any really good pesticides to treat organic orchards, though. So crop rotation is the way you deal with it. We get dry root rot. This is a wound infection of the fusarium that causes this discoloration and clogging of the xylem. Gophers can cause the wounding, weed whacking, tractor blight, any damage to the crown roots allows entry of the fusarium. Fusarium is a fungus that is pretty, what we say, cosmopolitan. It's everywhere. So all you have to do is create the wound. And then the tree looks great. And so it makes it through the winter. And then the first heat spell you get, boom, the tree goes down and there's no bringing it back. As opposed to verticillium wilt in avocado, you'll see the same thing. It goes down in a weekend. And if you protect it from sunburn damage, it will grow back. Dry root rot doesn't grow back. It's gone. Citrus canker. This has been a real problem in Florida. We've got to watch out for it here in California. It probably likes more humid conditions than we get here, but this is a worldwide problem in much of the citrus growing areas, China, Brazil. Citrus greening for sure. We know it happens here in California. It was found in Santa Paula, which is a town just east of Ventura, 3 years ago. It's all along Highway 126. So it was houses that bordered on the highway. So it was probably fruit or leaves or a contaminated tree that had Asian citrus psyllid on it that jumped off because it likes Santa Paula so much, and it found citrus trees right there. And they were ACP that were infected with the bacteria, and they got into those trees. Those trees have been removed. These trees are not far from commercial orchards. So those commercial orchards, and when I say not far, within a mile, less than a mile. So those orchards are being closely watched to see if ACP and HLB is spread to those trees. ACP, it causes twisted feeding. A lot of aphids and so on will cause that twisted feeding. The nymphs release this waxy material. It's easy to kill. Oil kills them, but you have to hit it. So there are pesticides that you can use in organic situations to control it. As far as I know, the ACP was found in Placerville on trees that came up from Southern California when somebody moved up there and they moved their container citrus, and somebody noticed them. Somebody knew what they were looking for, and they were destroyed by the ag commissioner. So as far as I know, it hasn't been introduced into the Central Valley. It's pretty much furthest north has been Santa Barbara at this point. Dogs can identify it. They can identify trees and differentiate trees that are infected with Phytophthora and with canker and with Tristeza and with trees that are infected with HLB. So dogs have been trained to distinguish amongst these different infections, and the tree creates a different smell for each one. We've had dogs working the orchards in Southern California. It's expensive though. There's biocontrol Tamarixi and diaphoretic citrus has been used for controlling ACP. There are fungi that are specific to ACP for biocontrol. Um, and for more about citrus, you can go to these websites. Um, this one is the UC Riverside citrus varieties. I sent Ellie two links, one to Gary Bender's Avocado Manual, which is the best background on avocado production, and then the citrus production manual that's put out by UCANR is also available. So with that, we'll open it up to question and answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna change us to gallery view so that if you'd like, you can turn on your video if you want to, no pressure, but you're welcome to if you'd like to, and just unmute yourself and ask questions. You're welcome to raise your hand if you want, or just shout it out. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and just start things off. We did have a question in the chat about where citrus fruit on the canopy. So my understanding is that citrus fruit usually appears like on the like exterior or the sort of edge of the canopy for the most part. Is that true, Ben?
Yeah,
And we
terminal
had okay,
produces on terminals.
term
And the thing to remember is that uh, flower terminals or terminals can appear within a, about 18 inches of the outside canopy. So you'll find some inside fruit, and that's because there's terminal growth, and that's where the flowers form. But yeah, generally speaking, it's outside fruit. The fruit forms, it weighs, it's got some weight, and so it then hangs inside the canopy, which is kind of good because fruit that hangs out on the outside will tend to sunburn.
okay. Cool, thank you. I have a bunch of questions, and maybe I'll just start with one of mine, and then we'll see if that gets folks thinking about their own questions. So we have a lot of microclimates in the North Bay area, which is probably true in a lot of areas around the coast. But we do have some pretty warm areas, like Dry Creek Valley, and Cloverdale actually has a citrus fair because I think we used to grow more citrus here a while ago. But so we have a lot of variety. We also have a lot of cooler areas, of course, too. So I was just wondering, like bearing that in mind, are there any varieties or rootstocks that you'd suggest for our region that would grow well here, but like also have pretty good market appeal? I know you mentioned like a lot of different ones, like you really like Gold Nugget, Sumo, Star Ruby. Do you think those are the sorts of things that maybe we want to consider trying here?
Well, I know consumers tend to really, really love their mandarins, which, is reflected. I mean, there's at least four major packers of bagged mandarin varieties that start appearing about November all the way through into June. And so you can't eat just one. Whereas it's really easy to eat just one, navel orange. So I would focus on the seedless varieties of mandarin, and and you know there were quite a number of gold nugget growers here, and they were packing through Sunkist, or they were marketing through Sunkist, and Sunkist decided, it's too delicate a piece of fruit, and you get bruising, and it's hard to find gold nuggets now, and so a lot of the growers around here stopped growing them. But as a farmer's market variety, it is a dandy piece of fruit. It's ugly as sin, but is a really easy peeler. It's good tasting. And because you can't get it in Vaughn's or Albertsons, whatever, um, people would look for it, I think. But you have to get them to taste it first.
Hmm. Yeah. I see Nancy unmuted yourself. Do you have a question, Nancy?
No, just had to switch from one machine that wasn't
Okay.
working to another.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You talked about applying gypsum to avocados, and I was wondering if it mattered if it was liquid gypsum or dry gypsum.
No, in fact, there's growers that have what are called gypsum injectors, and these are basically gypsum's not very soluble. So the
Yeah.
injectors are these machines that have paddles in them and mixing it all the time. But you got to keep injecting, and then you got to run fresh water through. Otherwise, you got a whole lot of plugged emitters. So you have to know what you're doing when you're injecting liquid gypsum.
I got a direct message in the chat. Question for small growers, say 10 acres or less, what would be the sales channels for citrus?
Oh man. So we've got a lot of packing houses down here. For avocados, we've got about 25. For citrus, we've got not only um, local ones, but we've got those that are in the Central Valley. And generally speaking, a packing house wants 20 acres of fruit before they'll take your contract. Now, you can work with your neighbors to have 20 pieces of Oro Blanco or, Star Ruby or something like that. But, to set up the pack lines, they have to run a certain amount of fruit through to test it. They have to, adjust things. And if it's just 1 or 2 acres of fruit, they usually don't want it. So we've got a guy here. We've got 2 packing houses that Friends Packing up in Ojai that have a modified pack line, and they'll do 1 or 2 acres. In fact, they couldn't handle 50 acres, so they really are set up for working with small growers. But and there's those 2 here, Shore Packing and Friends Packing. And then down in San Diego, there's a mess of the average sized avocado grower is 6 acres. There's a lot of small growers, and then the largest grower is um, actually it's an organic grower down in San Diego, and they've got about 1,200 acres of avocados. They've got their own pack line and everything, but there's a lot of small um, packers that do pomegranates and citrus and kumquats and just all um, but then they kind of fly by night. Friends Packing has been around since the 1950s, and Shore Packing has been, I don't know, 1960, 1970. So they're pretty stable around here. So I'm sure there must be something similar in the North Bay.
Well, based on what I've been able to find so far, I think our largest citrus orchard here is maybe 10 to 14 acres, and we only have like a very, very small handful of orchards, citrus orchards, and I only know of one commercial avocado planting where the avocados are being sold. So for us, I would say in our region, I would look more to, farmers markets, CSAs. We do have a really amazing aggregator distributor called Feed Cooperative, and definitely would recommend everyone just check out their website because there are tons of farmers who sell through Feed Cooperative, and so they can handle kind of like larger quantities. So that I would say that would be maybe our one aggregator distributor that I'm aware of in our region. But of course, there's also, the whole Bay Area and finding buyers throughout the Bay Area as well. Although I do think there's huge need for locally produced citrus in Sonoma County, in Napa and Marin. I think there's a lot of demand for it. So I would say, at least to start thinking, where I would start thinking through market channels would be farmers markets, farm stands, um, local restaurants, chefs, maybe certain groceries if you have enough fruit to sell, and maybe Feed Cooperative. So that's kind of what I'm aware of here. But everything's very, very small, I think, compared to
Mm.
your region, Ben. But it would be great if we did have more infrastructure for packing, processing, distribution. That's definitely, I think that would be good for our region. Yeah, Bill, go ahead.
Hey, I was wondering what you guys would recommend for just trying to assess a site, like what parameters we can look at for the climate or location that'll indicate whether or not we can get away with growing certain citrus and where to kind of look. Just it's hard to find, or it's scary taking that risk, and so trying to figure out what makes sense,
Yeah.
what's within those parameters.
Well, my relatives are up in Grants Pass and they're growing Meyer lemon. Meyer lemon is a sour mandarin, and it's very cold tolerant. Kumquats are very cold tolerant. Uh, Sweet oranges, navels, Valences are not very cold tolerant, um, especially navels because they come right in the middle of cold season. So there must be some way of assessing temperature ranges, and that would determine, the range. I mean, for example, finger limes. God damn it, man! They'll handle a hell of a lot of cold. I mean, they'll go down to 18 degrees and be fine. But if you grew 100 acres of finger limes, you'd swamp the market for the demand. Um, Whereas, again, I don't understand why more people don't eat kumquats. So if you head in that direction, you're trying to create a market. Um, uh, Kiwi fruit was nothing. It was called Chinese gooseberry. And Frida Kaplan came along and said, "Who's going to eat a gooseberry?" I know what gooseberries taste like. If you've ever had them, they're sour. I don't know. You eat them because you put a lot of sugar in them. So she said, "No, let's change the name. This is a really great piece of fruit." And boom, kiwi fruit took off. And so this guy, John Roberts, said, "Oh, we're going to do the same thing with feijoa. Feijoa is so good." And he went around and he got all these growers to plant it in the Central Valley along the coast here. And nobody eats feijoa. It's a great piece of fruit, but it takes a Frida Kaplan to build a market. And I think it's going to take the same thing to do kumquats. So, figure out what your temperature ranges, and then all fruit trees, all trees. In the old days, people looked for clay soil to plant their walnuts and almonds and avocados for that matter, because it was all dependent on rain. And so you look to plant on 40 or 50 or even 80-foot spacings between trees. Well, what clay soil is terrible for trees, so everyone has gone to irrigation, and now we look for well-drained soils because you can control the water. So we're on spacings now of 15 or 12 feet between trees. Well, so number one, you look for the temperature regime, and then you look for well-drained soils. And if you have issues of drainage, I've seen this even in the Central Valley. We pioneered planting on berms and mounds, and you can see it happening in almond orchards now in the Central Valley. So you can improve drainage by, on heavier soils, planting on mounds. So look for temperature and soils. And then if you're looking at citrus, there's a wide range of temperature adaptations. Um, and
Yeah,
especially amongst mandarins.
thanks. That's a really great, thorough answer. Thank you, Ben. And I just wanted to add too, real quick, that I put a link in the chat, again, to that book that Ben recommended, the Citrus Production Manual through UCCE. And there's, if you do click on that, there's a little area where you can read about this item, and it outlines, like, it has a bullet point list of all the things it covers. And a lot of those would be really useful in answering that question too, just building off of what Ben was saying around orchard establishment, climate requirements, soil and water analysis, looking for salinity, and so on. So there's a long list of considerations, profitability, how much water you need, stuff like that. So anyway, just for everyone to know, that book covers that too. So yeah. Oh, sorry, was there anything else, Ben, you wanted to say on that before we go to the next question?
No.
Okay. All right, Ross, go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to add to that. Up here in the North Bay, we've got all these little, these little valleys, and so for us, we farm a little bit on the hillside and a little bit on the valley bottom, and it's all about a little bit of elevation to get the air drainage. Because if you plant in the bottom, like I've got some Meyer lemons that died in a hard frost about 10 years ago. But up on the hillside, you'd even like 20 feet in elevation higher, and you don't get the problem.
Yeah.
So it's really air drainage is the biggest thing, and then you get water drainage as well. So it's all to the good. A little bit of elevation.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross. That reminds me of some things you were saying, Ben, about how a lot of farmers in your region plant on hillsides as well, for avocados. We have a question in the chat from Stacy. What do you think regarding the future prospects for macroot limes and pomelos? I might be saying that word wrong.
I didn't understand the first limes.
So it's written in the chat if you'd like to read it, but it says, what do you think regarding the future prospects for macroot limes and pomelos?
Well, pomelos are a acquired taste, and they're big, and they're almost all flesh. But and the thing is, you have to charge by piece. If you charge by weight, you're going to be paying $8 a piece of fruit, and that's not going to make it. Kefir lime. Kefir lime. Kefir lime. Yeah, I mean, it's a specialized market. It's going to be Thai food. You're going to be marketing directly to Thai restaurants. So you're going to have to find all the Thai restaurants and say, "Hey, I got kefir lime." So it's in Southern California, you can grow one avocado tree and you can sell the fruit off that, no problem. If you've got 20 acres of lemons, we've got pack houses, and they'll take it. Once you deviate from lemons and avocados, it's all marketing. So if you're doing pomegranates, you're doing figs, you're doing mulberries, you're doing kefir lime, it's all legwork. And I found that there are growers that only like to grow, and then there's people who are marketers who only like to market, and it's rare that you find a crossover. We've got a few people like Craig Underwood, who developed the baby vegetable market, who loves to farm and he loves to go to farmers markets, and he developed sriracha. And then when he had a falling out with the sriracha people, he developed his own market of srirachas. We've got a woman here who is marketing coffee. She developed a coffee collaborative, and but she loves farming. So those are not very common people. You got to love hustling if you're going to be doing kefir.
Ross, did you have another question? I saw your hand was up.
No more questions. Sorry, I just forgot to put it down.
No worries. Okay, sounds good. Okay, it's 3 o'clock, and I know I said we'd take a quick break. Does anyone else have more questions for Ben before we do that?
I see Mike Sullivan's here. He knows everything. He's a great teacher.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we'll get into the grower panel after a quick break.
Is Robert Abbott here?
Robert Abbott. I see a Robert. I'm not sure. Oh, there.
Yes, I'm here.
No, it's the Robert, not a Robert.
His last name wasn't showing up, so I wasn't sure if it was that Abbott.
I'm a novice user.
No, that's okay. No worries. Welcome. Thank you guys both for being here. I appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break just because we've been sitting for 2 hours now. So we're just going to take 10 minutes, get up and stretch, get a snack, do what you got to do, and we'll be back at 3:10. Okay. Thanks, everyone. All right, welcome back, everyone. Give folks a moment to come back to your computer or your phone or however you're listening to this. And we're going to move into the grower panel, which is very exciting. Thank you to our 4 growers who are here today to talk all about what citrus and avocado production looks like for you. And we're just going to start with an introductory question that I'm going to put in the chat just so that everyone can see it. So I think what we'll do is just go through and ask each grower panelist to answer the question for you and your operation. And Ross and Rebecca, I know you guys work together, so if you want to divide it up for avocados and citrus or however you want, feel free to do that. But okay, so question 1 is in the chat now, and it is introduction. Tell us a bit about yourself and your citrus and avocado production. Where are you located? What scale are you at? You can tell us a little about your management approaches if you want, where you sell, and just that kind of stuff. So who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, thanks, Robert.
Hey, everybody. I'm Robert Abbott in Carpinteria, which is pretty close to the ocean. We're about a mile from the ocean, and we split Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. We grow avocados commercially on a couple hundred acres. Half of that is family owned, and half of that we manage for other people. We are 100% organic. We also grow some cherimoyas on just 4 acres. We used to grow more lemons, but we're down to 2 acres of lemons. And that stuff mostly goes to local markets. We do farmers markets, as well as selling to packing houses. And we also grow some fun stuff that's just for kind of for the family and because it feels good. We grow beans, we grow field flowers. We rent our neighbor's field that's like a 5-acre field where we do that. I do think that having a little bit of a row cropping background with those items has informed my avocado growing. And then yeah, the management side of the business has been a nice addition to what we do, just because the markets have been very erratic, and it's been really tumultuous the last few years trying to make a consistent income, specifically with lemons, and right now we're also having a little turbulence with the avocados.
Okay, thank you so much, Robert.
Yep.
Who would like to go next for intros?
I can go.
Okay.
I'm Rebecca. I farm with Ross Cannard. We own Seven Moons Farm. And we grow in Sonoma County. We're both pretty new at this. I'm about 3 years into citrus and avocado. So I still feel like there's a lot to learn, but we definitely have learned a lot in those last 3 years. We have maybe we have about three acres total of avocados and citrus. Probably a little bit more citrus than avocados. We are not certified organic, although we really take good care of our soil and try to give it, don't use chemicals, and basically approaching it holistically. And we sell through feed cooperative, farmers markets. We have a big restaurant account that we sell to, although the citrus and avocados mostly go to like the local farmers markets and through feed cooperative. Did I miss anything?
I don't know. All of our avocados are on a pretty steep hillside to stay out of the frost zone down below, and our citrus is kind of below that on the hillside. We have 2 different locations, and we have citrus in both locations. A couple of old avocado trees on the old farm. bacons. But yeah, that's about it. We're pretty small scale, but as far as citrus and avocado goes, there's not a lot going up here in the North Bay yet. So we're it, I guess. I don't know. There's a few other citrus growers around here, but not much in the way of avocados for sure.
There's a lot of Meyer lemon growers, but which we don't really grow. So, and that's us.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, that tracks with everything I've heard too. Okay, and last but not least, Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Sullivan, and I wear a couple different hats. I think I would say that I am a partner with Jim Churchill for Churchill Orchard. We grow citrus and avocados, and then I do some management. I should say Churchill Orchard certified organic for, oh Lord, 20 or 25 years, something like that. And then I manage probably almost 1,000 acres, mixed, mostly citrus and avocados. And that's split probably 50-50 certified organic and conventional. Most of the conventional is something I would call conventional plus, where we're trying to do the right thing, but maybe we like urea too much to quit on that ranch. I run a packing house, a small little bitty one, and I sell a lot of my own fruit. And the last thing I would say is kudos to Ben for going nonstop for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But I would add that I have a list of not less than 12 items that I would like to, dispute directly at Ben. So I'm sure we'll get to each of those. And I'm curious, I guess I'll ask you, who are we in this presentation? Are we 2 to 3 acre, kind of small market growers, or are we people who are thinking about expanding avocado production further north, or what's the scale? Because I think the discussion could be so different. What I tell you will be a lot different if you want to plant 20 acres of avocados than if you want to have 25 trees for a farmer's market. So I guess that's that. Back to you guys.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great question. I would turn that over to the audience, but I'll say my first impression is just I think we're starting off really, really small here. We, like they were saying, Ross was saying, what Ross and Rebecca are doing in terms of avocados is the only commercial avocado planting I'm aware of in our region. So we really don't have them here yet, but part of why the large, motivation for me doing this webinar is I think we could be growing more avocados here and more citrus. Definitely could be. We have incredible market access through all of these different avenues that folks have mentioned. And we have a lot of demand locally for this stuff. So there's a lot of interest. People ask me a lot, like, hey, what's the next new crop? What could I grow avocados? Could I grow citrus? I get this question a lot, and I'm like, oh, sure, we can grow lots of things. And to me, these two, citrus and avocados, represent high value, niche, crops that have a lot of potential for our region, and there's a lot of demand. So that's kind of where we're starting from, is very, very small. But there also are a lot of vineyard managers who approach me saying, hey, grapes aren't doing so great these days.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at other options, and so I think in other cases, there are a small handful of folks who maybe used to grow grapes or still do grow grapes, but they want to take maybe 10, 20 acres or more even and do something new with them. But it does, like Will was saying earlier, taking that leap and saying, okay, I'm going to commit to a larger planting. I mean, not many people are taking that leap right now. And so that's why I'm really trying to frame this as like starting small, but with the idea that there could be potential to scale up. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Sure.
I think a big part of it is that there is no packing infrastructure, or there's nothing in the North Bay. There's no packing house. We got wineries here. There's no avocado or citrus packing houses. So yeah, starting small in that way, I think that's kind of that's a big hurdle to, someone's not going to plant 20 acres of citrus if they are going to have a hard time selling it. And so yeah, I think starting small is probably the way that most people are going to go. Plus, which the high value vineyard ground is the hillside stuff, and that's where, you know, for frost prevention we need some of that hillside ground for these crops as well. So the most of the lower value vineyard ground is like the nice bottom soil in our valleys that might be better for other crops than the citrus and avocado. So we'll probably stay on the, you know, on the smaller scale in the nearest future.
So I guess let me respond, because that's really helpful. First, somebody asked me or put in the chat, where do I grow? Churchill Orchards in Ojai, in Ventura County. It's less coastal, more inland, and you know, gets hot and cold. The rest of that ground is across Ventura County. Some of it's a little more coastal, some of it's a little more inland. But much like you guys, we have any number of microclimates. Okay, so that answers that question. To the response of starting off small, I think that you all have a very good example in grapes right now, which is that grapes are way overplanted, right? I feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I say that. And I would advise anybody who's trying to start to measure a planting in citrus and avocado in more than a couple of acres, both of those are overplanted too. And so with that in mind, you guys have maybe an opportunity, and that's not to plant Hass, that's not to plant, I don't know, commodity lemons, but it's to try something new, and to operate from a standpoint of not knowing any better, right? You know, people ask me all the time, oh, what should we do next? And what's the next thing? And, you know, none of us actually know that. But I guess my point is, Ben mentioned a few times, you know, sumos, $4 a piece. Well, if you want to lose a lot of money, go plant a bunch of sumos right now, because I can promise you, much like the grape growers, somebody looked around and said, wow, this vineyard thing is amazing. I can, you know, make money that way, and I can have a vineyard and be cool. And now I hear about it across the state, people pulling out vines. As farmers, we have a habit of chasing the dollar we see in the store. And I would advise very strongly against doing that, at least at scale. If you have a different model and you can market it locally in markets or kind of at small scale, then great. But if you're looking in the store and you're seeing sumos for $4 and thinking that's a good idea, I've got a neighbor who's got 20 acres of them who can't sell them, who would tell you that that's a bad idea. So just a piece of advice.
Oh, that's super helpful. Thank you so much, Mike. And actually, this segues really nicely into another question I had that I'll put in the chat as well. But it's just, what advice would you give someone who's exploring commercial production, you know, for these crops? Yeah, bearing in mind we're talking starting small for sure. But yeah, any other advice from you, Mike, or other panelists? What would you tell people? And maybe what do you wish you had known, you know, before you started?
Right now, I wish I know less. No, seriously. And I mean that as a sort of like way of strategic thinking. We have some people nearby who are think they're going to try a different model. And it's like talking to one of my farming mentors about it. And it's like, you know, it's dumb. You know, what they think they're going to do isn't going to work. And they're just funded by somebody with a big bag of money, and this is a bad idea. And the guy, Roger, says, but you know what? Sometimes not knowing enough not to do it helps you actually achieve it, right? You're not limited by knowing better, if that makes sense. So I wish I knew less, because, and to be really frank, the ideas or things that interest me right now are more passion projects than production projects, you know, because maybe they'll evolve, but sometimes we know too much and we don't try things because we know that they won't work.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, good to try to keep an open mind and blank slate sometimes. Robert, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I wish I knew less too. I do think I think Ben's point of being able to hustle is a really good one. And I know some growers who hustle on a large scale too. And maybe not a huge scale, but they're moving 50 acres of production every week. When I got involved, my farm's a family farm, and when I got involved, I was like, well, how do I find a place for me on this business that's already running successfully? So the first thing I did was I started kind of looking at what was a waste product on the farm. And I started doing farmers markets, and we had taken out a block. So we had these little baby trees in the ground, and in between the baby trees, there's a bunch of ground that wasn't growing anything except weeds. So we started growing field flowers. And those 4 or 5 years when we like started that creative process, granted, I was in my 20s, I had a lot of energy, but that was the most fun I've ever had farming. And I'd made very little money at it. But we did establish a presence, and we did get a name for ourselves locally at the farmers market. And now that's a pretty solid part of our business that pretty much is coasting. And it is year in, year out. Our revenue from farmers markets is very consistent. Our revenue on the wholesale side will fluctuate, not just because the tree production fluctuates, which they can fluctuate easily 100% a year, but the market can also fluctuate. We're right now looking at a market around $1 a pound for avocados, which is really, really low. And 8 months ago, it was $3 a pound for organic. So that's just a crazy, crazy market. If you're going to go spend a lot of money planting an orchard and then throw your hard work at this roller coaster ride, then yeah, don't quit your day job. Yeah, and in terms of like what you want to do, I think if you know that you're going to be in a position where you have to hustle, grow something that you really enjoy, because that's the thing that you're going to be able to sell. So if you're going to have to not just farm but also sell, then definitely grow where something that your heart's in.
That's great advice. It's great advice.
Yeah, thank you. Ross and Rebecca, any advice from you guys?
I think, yeah, that's definitely grow something you're passionate about, and I agree about, not it doesn't seem like anyone, I don't know what anyone on this call intentions or goals are, but I doubt that anyone's ready to plant 20 acres of avocados or something like that. But it seems to me like small scale wholesale, like feed cooperative, has been fantastic for us. Farmers markets, on the smaller end of the scale is where we're going to be able to have success in this area. I think, we're not going to be growing large acreages and taking them into the Central Valley or somewhere to pack.
I think something that's important to share is that Ross and I both come from more of a row cropping vegetable background, and the citrus for us, the citrus fits in really nicely in the winter. And so if you are already a farmer and you're looking to incorporate like avocados or citrus, like look for product that's going to fill in when you're a little bit slower, because for us, like we're already so busy kind of, August into the end of the year. We don't want to have citrus at that time of year. And so we want it now. We want it, for the next 3 to 5 months when it's spring and we don't have as much coming out of the field because it's winter. And so that's my advice if someone's getting into citrus. If you're just getting into citrus for year round, that advice doesn't apply. But for people who have kind of the farming background and want to incorporate it into their overall crop plan, I think look at where you have that time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yesterday I was in a citrus orchard in Sonoma County, and I talked to someone who actually works most of the year on an organic vegetable farm here and said, man, it's really nice to have work in the wintertime here at this citrus orchard. So I think, yeah, thinking through, you know, timing and maybe employee retention too for farms, veg farms who want to diversify, stuff like that. That's a great point. And
Well,
that
one
goes,
more, one more,
yeah, yeah.
sorry. One more thing I just wanted to add was, we have a really diverse citrus orchard, and I kind of wish that it wasn't so diverse because it would be a lot easier for us to just be like, okay, we have, 4 rows of quiche and we can just focus on selling the quiches. But instead we have like just like a little bit too much variety. So there can, anyway, it's there's kind of a fine balance of like you don't want to grow all the same thing, but you also don't want it to be so diverse that it's too complicated.
Yeah, that is a subject I feel like every farmer I've ever talked to brings up at some point, just like how, at least in this region, how diverse is diverse enough without being too overly complicated and difficult to manage. It's a really good point. And that kind of segues nicely into this other question I had about like which varieties do you think, like if you could narrow down a little bit, which varieties of citrus and avocado are your favorites, and why? And that's a question really for all panelists of what are your favorite varieties? Why are they your favorite? What would you recommend?
Well, I just want to say what we tried growing Pixie in Sonoma and it didn't really work out. So whoever chimed in and said that Pixie only grows in this one spot, I believe that.
Yeah, Ben's fundamentally wrong on that. Sorry, Ben. And I guess what I would say about varieties is Lynn Cove is a UC extension experimental station, and they every December they put out a couple hundred varieties of citrus that you can go and taste. And you should go and taste those if you want to grow citrus. Riverside often does something similar in the kind of late spring. And when you go to those places, you have to keep in mind that what you're observing and what you're tasting is based on how the university system grows the fruit and based on how it behaves in those areas. It'll give you a kind of a sense of the fruit, but it's not going to tell you how it's going to be in the North Coast. And the pixies, for example, in Lynn Cove are dreadful. They're dreadful because it gets the diurnal spread is too narrow, so they don't maintain acid. And the guys that are doing the farming for the experimental station put on too much nitrogen. So they're terrible. They're green. They're not good. In a different place, they grow totally differently. So, back to my point earlier, you are going to have to try something. It might be a thing for extension up there to put in a small test block and, see what works in your area, because not all varieties behave the same in all areas. I mean, as you guys, I'm sure know. So,
Yeah, we're noticing that kind of across the board with citrus and avocados, every variety ripens 2 or 3 months later than the Southern California recommendations, absolutely everything. So we're getting Hass in the midsummer through the fall, really starting in the late summer, maybe. Kind of the same with Reed. Our bacon doesn't start ripening until April, probably. And citrus as well. We in Sonoma, we kind of barely have enough heat to grow good blood oranges. They're just like don't get super sweet and bloody. They're decent, they're okay, but you really have to. It seems like it's so site dependent, and we have in this area there's so many microclimates that everyone's going to be different. I bet over in Napa Valley or either places like up in Cloverdale where it gets hot, you could grow really good blood oranges, and it's not very far away, but huge differences.
Yeah, we grow well, I have my favorite that we grow is the quiche, in terms of flavor. And I also love the Washington Navel. But in terms of production, we do really well with the like kind of boring stuff like the Eureka lemon. Like it's just like a simple lemon and but nobody else really has high production of them. And they're huge trees and we we probably are harvesting them like 8 months of the year. So it's a great tree for us. And then the Bear's Lime is also another really heavy producer and a little bit different than what other people are growing. And so we do really well with that fruit as well.
And selling into our local wholesale market, through Feed Sonoma, it's no one else has it. You can get it obviously anywhere, on through the wholesalers, but locally no one has it. And so for restaurants and people who are interested in buying locally, there's not a lot of other options.
Yeah, I think place is important for the variety. You just got to try it out. I top worked a bunch of Myers over to Shiranui. The Myers grew really well, but there's no market for them. I couldn't sell them. So I got some Shiranui, which is the sumo budwood, and I grafted them over, and they're horrible. They're just junk. And then after that, I decided to get some Kishu budwood, and I know Mike does really well with Kishus in Ojai. Kishus in Carpinteria, not so great.
Yeah.
So anyway, I miss growing lemons. Lemons are amazing. They're a super hardy tree. They're super robust. They are incredibly productive. They're pretty easy to grow. They do need pruning. And we used to spray them twice a year with just basically with oil, organic sprays. But there's no market, and then we were also having real issues with the Argentine ants. So we decided to take out our lemons. But I would say if you guys have an opportunity to grow lemons on a 3-month delayed market, in a niche market, by all means grow lemons. I mean, that to me would make a lot of sense.
The caveat is don't grow Meyer lemons in the North Bay.
Yeah, just grow the regular old lemons. Yeah. And the packing houses down here, they evolved during a time when the value of a packing house used to be measured in how many train cars could fit in refrigeration. So the fruit would be picked and it would often be put into cold storage for a month or 2 or 3 months before it even made it to the store. And that at that time, that was an efficient way to grow the crop. But I've always felt like the best place to store the crop is on the tree itself. So I think that's a real opportunity for the North.
Yeah, Ross, would you like to share with everyone why you would recommend not growing Myers lemons in the North Bay area? Because I don't think it's necessarily because of climate.
No, they do really well here. But there was a fad of planting Meyer lemons here 20 years ago, maybe even continuing until recently. And everyone has a Meyer lemon in their backyard. Everyone knows someone who has a Meyer lemon. Everyone's trying to give you Meyer lemons. And
it's the most overplanted fruit tree in Sonoma County, basically.
So thanks for the heads up on that one. Yeah. So in terms of demand, it's not going to be very.
Yeah, unless you want one for yourself. Don't try to sell them at the farmer's market. Don't try to. Everyone bad mouths them at the farmer's market. They're out of popularity.
So a quick case study on Myers is I farm an old Mexican land grant down here, and it was one of the first places that had Myers. And it used to sell its Myers. This is in the mid 90s, and it used to sell its Myers in all over the state. And this is before Sunset Magazine and Martha Stewart and everybody else pushed them. And they made really good money on them. And they tore them out. We tore them out a couple of years ago because they got overplanted. And so again, we're going to throw different variety names or whatever out at you, but farmers have a bad habit of, forget my language, but screwing themselves on the marketing by overplanting. So it's really going to be up to individuals to find the thing. And also these markets, they cycle. And Ben mentioned it before. Where I am in Ojai, we used to have a lot more Valencia acreage. And for a while, many, many years ago, we got a premium for it because our Valencias are better than the ones that are grown in the Central Valley. We stopped getting that premium. The market fell apart. People pulled out Valencias. And then there's a paradigm shift where there's not enough Valencia acreage anymore. Something happens in Florida, whatever. And so if you planted Valencias 6-7 years ago and you have 6 or 7 year old trees, you're doing all right now. And I actually think discussing with the grower that tore out his Meyer lemons, but not about planting more Meyers for a number of reasons, but we might go back and replant some lemons because it's crazy enough that it might work, right? It's unorthodox, and sometimes following the orthodoxy in farming is going to cause you to just be late. So back to the I wish I knew less. Maybe it's okay to be crazy enough to plant some more young lemons in a place like Ventura County, or for that matter, up in the North Bay. So there's just a couple of recent case studies, I guess, in how varieties have come and gone. I would just one more thing to add. I'm looking at my notes from Ben's presentation. Grow for quality, please, please. Robert was saying about how we hold the lemons in storage often for 2-3 months at a time before they get sold. And there's reasons for that when you're operating at large scale. But a lemon can be a decent piece of fruit. And if you're going to grow for farmer's market, be the guy that grows the really good lemons, the ones that are yellow, the ones that have a little bit of sugar in them. If you're the person that's growing limes, not all limes are the same. You can get a lime that Brix is 5 and it tastes okay in your Corona, I guess, if you drink Corona. But you can also wait a little bit longer. You can grow a lime that Brix is 12 and it's going to make people go, wow, that's good. I've lost my video somehow. Sorry. Anyways, more pontificating at you guys.
No, it was a great point. Do you have any tips for increasing quality? You could maybe give an example or two if you'd like.
In the case of citrus, I would say to be really thoughtful about your nitrogen applications, whether organic or conventional. It's not necessarily the volume, it's the timing, especially in mandarins. In avocados, wait, don't pick them too early. Ben put up the dry matter levels, and they have these release dates. And I promise you, if you're picking Hass near the release date, it's going to be a crap piece of fruit. If you're in a place, here's an interesting marketing opportunity for somebody up there if you could hold them. Hass or other avocados can hold for a long time on the tree if you're in the right place. And if you let them get mature enough, they're like vegetable butter, right? I sell a bunch of reeds. I sell a lot of reeds up in the Bay. We don't look at the reeds until July. And the only reason we start in July or August on them is because if we don't start, we don't finish. It's sort of a pipeline issue. But I don't give reeds to my mom until September. The last reeds, I just picked the very last reeds that I have anywhere 2 weeks ago, and it's better than butter. I mean, the level of solids and oil in those pieces of fruit is incredible. And there's this opportunity, if you are going to grow small scale commodity crops, lemons, standard avocado varieties. Grow for quality. You can beat Sunkist, the Wonderful Company, all the other guys just by growing them better. But often that's waiting and absorbing the risk of waiting. Limes never taste like the thing because the big lime growers pick them all. Because if you wait, they have a bad habit of all falling on the ground. But if you're a small grower growing limes, you might be able to absorb that risk of waiting a little bit longer to have a better piece of fruit. So, anyways, grow for quality.
Oh, thank you. That's great. I'm all about it. Rebecca, Ross, Robert, do you want to add other tips for quality?
Well, I just want to second that Reed is my favorite avocado.
Nice. Cool.
Such a good one. Yeah, I mean, we're small enough that we don't, if something is stored in the walk-in for more than a week, that's unusual. We have Bear's limes, and those limes are actually ripe when they're yellow,
Yep.
not green. So we're waiting. We're waiting till they actually turn yellow to sell them, even though people look at them at the market and think that they're lemons. But we can still sell them because we're a small enough grower, that we can talk to the customer and explain it and sell it through feed cooperative, because nobody else really has too many limes up here.
I've been trying to convince my market customers that they should buy their Bear slimes when they're yellow. And I pick some yellow and I pick some green, and the green ones always sell first. Yeah, I like Reed's. The parent of Reed, which is Nabal, I think is my favorite. I don't know. Ben, do you know if Nabals would grow up there? That's a really amazing piece of fruit. And then, yeah, I'll just second, just let the fruit hold. At least down here, and depending on your microclimate, we are still picking old crop. So we're picking avocados and just for the farmers market. The packing houses shut down in September or October. But for the farmers markets, we're picking fruit that has been on the tree for 21 months, 20 or 21 months. And some of it is a little funky. They can almost get a little too oily, but that's like less than 10%. Like 90% of the fruit is just gorgeous. And I do think that, as the bigger market, as the conventional market gets larger and larger, and we have more and more competition with Mexico and Chile and Peru and Mission now has 40,000 acres under contract in Colombia or more, now that they've combined with Colavo. I mean, it's going to get gnarly. So we need to differentiate ourselves. And yeah, California has always called itself a superior piece of fruit. We always wear the quality hat, but let's prove it. And I think the easiest way to prove it is to just hold onto that crop and wait for the oil to get really good.
Awesome. Thanks.
And can you guys talk about some of your favorite avocado varieties?
I had some older folks come up to me once when I had an avocado tasting, and I said, well, here's a Reed, and here's a Nabal, and here's a Gwen. And they said, do you have a MacArthur? And I said, yeah, here's a MacArthur. And they said, that is the best fruit ever. And I went, oh, okay. It's it's in the palate of the beholder. I was like, MacArthur, that. But as Robert said, Nabal is a dandy piece of fruit. When it's ripe in the summertime, it's one of the best.
I used to do the Mountain View Farmers Market, right? We used to come up, and maybe one of these days we'll come up and do the Berkeley Farmers. We did the Berkeley Farmers Markets for years and years and years and years. And one year we did the Mountain View Farmers Market, a couple of years actually. And anyways, we have a bunch of bacons. One of the orchards was originally an old bacon avocado orchard back when bacon was a commercial variety. And we've always prided ourselves on kind of letting the bacons hang as long as we can. We're lucky we don't get the the blossom end rot that people do in other places. And I was amazed the volume and the price that we got for bacon avocados at the Mountain View Farmers Market. And what happened were South Asians from any number of different countries would come up to my wife and go, "Oh my God, this is the avocado that I used to have in the Philippines, right? Or this is the avocado that I did this with in this other culture." And when you go to a farmer's market in Ventura or Santa Barbara County right now, and somebody shows you bacon avocados, they're usually what am I trying to say? They're usually stuff they just throw out there, and they don't value it, and they don't grow it for quality, and they don't grow it for size. And bacons are usually in the avocado orchards at this point just for pollinizer trees. But if you're willing to go out there and explore and take a variety that the industry abuses and grow it for quality, then you can have a market. Like I'm kind of itching to go back to the farmers market at Mountain View in a year or two and sell more bacons. Just some life stuff got in the way, but like that was really fun to sort of prove big ag wrong, right? To show the orthodoxy of varietals that they were incorrect, that actually you could make money and make people happy growing a really nice piece of bacon avocados. That's just, down here they're poo-pooed. So I like bacons if they're done correctly.
Anything anyone wants to add? Favorite avocados? Least favorite avocados?
I just had an idea, which is I don't know if you guys know about the Carmen avocado, which is a sport of Hass that was identified in Mexico, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. And we have planted some. And we have a couple different microclimates, and in one area, this is on a hilltop where with heavier soils, they're actually doing really well. And this is basically a Hass quality piece of fruit, but it blooms in our climate here in Carpinteria. It blooms in November, December, January. And so the fruit matures opposite season. So basically a year from there, like we will start to pick our first Carmens for the season next month or at the end of this month when Hass tastes like grass and it's just horrible. So I think somebody should plant some Carmen up there just as an experiment to see what would happen, because and in Mexico it has a completely different growth pattern. So anyway, it's been super successful here. Even though it grows right next to Hass and it can produce some fruit that look kind of like a normal Hass would look, there's other fruit that are round and smooth skin hanging on the same tree. It just depends when that flower was pollinated and at what point during the growth cycle of the tree that fruit received its meat. So anyway, that's just an aside, but I think it would be worth looking at. In terms of cold hardiness, I don't know if it's any better than the normal Hass. It does tend to bear its fruit on the outside of the tree, which can be bad if you are worried about sun protection and things like that. We do get a lot of sunburn and wind-scarred fruit, but worth looking into.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thanks for sharing that. We have a question in the chat from Jack. What is the source for Nabol avocado trees?
Nabal.
Thank you, Nabal.
Yep. I've always sent people to Four Winds nursery. I don't know if they have Nabals per se, but I bet you if you asked them, they'd get them for you. And what are they? Four Winds is up in Winters, right? And if I know my geography at all, it's not that far from y'all. They have a whole plethora of varieties of citrus and avocados. So that would be my, if a person wants onesies and twosies, that's where I would start. If you want more than that, then you need to go to a commercial avocado nursery. And the only one I use is Brokaw, and I bet they could get you Nabal Budwood and do it for you. But a Brokaw tree right now is $43, and you can't get any until 2028. And so, if you're doing onesie twosies, 4 wins. If you're planting an orchard, well, try something different.
Yeah. There's a nursery in Santa Cruz, Epicenter, that has a lot of weird varieties, including Nabal, but they're all seedling rootstocks. They don't grow clonal rootstocks.
I would say,
I was just gonna say I believe the majority of our citrus and avocados is from Four Winds.
From where?
Four
Winds. Four Winds.
Yeah, the Four Winds. Yeah.
Yeah, they're great. They're great folks. They do a nice job. That's why I would send people up there. I would say we sometimes as commercial growers, and if I were putting $1 million into a planting or something, I'd care more about clonal rootstock. If I'm only doing a few, I don't know that I care as much. I have seen clonal rootstocks on avocados go completely to hell. And I've seen other ones do really well. I also have a couple of places. I farm a place where the avocados there were planted on seedling rootstock in 1958, and they produce 15 to 16,000 pounds an acre right now, which, if you know avocado yields, that's good. And it's just a matter of being farmed correctly and having the soil taken care of correctly. So sometimes we can get a little too focused on clonal rootstocks, is all I will say. If it's clonal rootstocks is the thing that's like, oh no, I got to get that. It's more that it's a well-made tree, right? That it's not, here in Ventura County, we have a couple of kind of fly-by-night roadside type nurseries where what you buy is a seedling rootstock tree that is from a seedling that somebody, did in their bathtub. And, if you go to a reputable nursery and it's seedling rootstock, it can be okay. You're just going to have to be more thoughtful about watering and drainage issues. There was a note in there in the chat earlier about hillside versus flat ground. And the real thing is besides cold, which I would imagine would be important for you guys, the other thing is drainage. And you can work around that in a number of ways. You can berm, you can fix drainage, or you can plant around drainage. So anyways, long-winded again.
Oh, no worries. That's all super helpful. Thanks. Yeah, Will had a question. Frost protection in citrus, water versus air versus frost, blankets. Robert said all of the above. Does anyone want to kind of elaborate on frost protection, what you guys do?
I miss smudge puts. I'm kidding, kind of. I haven't had to turn on a wind machine in 3 years, so I've forgotten a little bit about frost protection. And it's not really a joke. It's the weirdest thing. We spend thousands of dollars a year down here right now in wind machine maintenance and all that stuff, and it's not getting cold. I have some mandarins in Ojai right now that I have people crawling all over me for, and I don't have color because it hasn't gotten cold enough yet. And it's kind of starting to come, but I would expect now in mid-January to be happening. But to your question, I use wind machines primarily. If I had a high enough value and young planting, then I would put some frost cloth on it, and we did that once upon a time. Probably 10 years ago, there was a New Year's Eve where there's a device called a frost dragon. And on New Year's Eve, I made myself a thermos of hot toddy and drove a frost dragon around all night. And I miss those days. But Yeah, mostly wind machines. Mostly wind machines. Sometimes we'll put down a little bit of water.
What is a frost
ahead of time.
dragon?
Frost Dragon, you all should Google this. The Frost Dragon is essentially a PTO powered device that goes on the back of your tractor that has four, I don't know, 50 to 100 gallon tanks of propane and a big fan, and it lights, blows hot air, literally blows hot air. It's amazing. We borrowed it from a vineyard.
Whoa, I've never heard
Get a
of that.
frost
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. It's
Rebecca
fun.
and Ross, since you are on a smaller scale, what do you guys do for frost protection?
We just rely on air
Cross our
drainage
fingers.
on the hillside.
Oh, low cost.
Yeah, I have worked in vineyards in this area, and I've used both sprinkler systems and wind machines. The only thing I really didn't like was the micro sprinklers that we had installed in some vineyards that are so finicky and terrible to maintain and would not really work they work in a vineyard because they kind of sprinkle bi-directionally instead of in 360 degrees. They wouldn't work in an orchard situation anyway. But wind machines would probably be, if you had to, I would recommend over sprinklers. They take a lot of water.
Okay, thanks. And Robert, you said all of the above, but I was just wondering if you have a favorite strategy.
Yeah, it's been even warmer here than it has for Micah. We haven't had to do much for frost protection for several years, but we have done all those three things, and I'd say, I mean, the wind machines, they were already there. So I don't know what a new wind machine costs, or if you have to pencil that out. That might be significant. But hey, for us turning the water on, it's no big deal. We just open a valve and turn on the well, and away we go. And I feel like that is unless you're on heavy ground and you can't, and you're just flooding things. I really like the water. And then frost blankets, we've had some success with frost blankets. We've also been able to kind of nurse back trees that didn't have a good couple first months by putting frost blankets on them and just leaving them on all winter. But you got to watch out for the hot days. If you get an 80-degree day in there, you're gonna really hurt that tree. So you got to be ready to, if we had, I think, 50 trees covered with frost blankets. So that was easy enough to put them on and then put them off, take them off when we needed to.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. It sounds like frost is maybe not the biggest challenge for everyone, so that's good. But kind of segues into another question I had, which is just like, what have been the biggest challenges with these crops, and what resources, tools have been the most helpful? It's a big can of worms, but
yeah, where do you want
got
to
time.
start? Where do you want to start? Gosh.
Markets.
Yeah, except like markets. Except I think that if the wholesale avocado market is 90 cents right now, I don't think that's going to apply to small retail, right? And so there's always ways to kind of finagle around the market if your scale is correct. It can be water, it can be labor, it can be the current political administration. I mean, it's the source is endless. I would tell you, and this doesn't have to do with those varieties, it's just, I'll use this as a moment of therapy. Mine is time allocation right now. That's my biggest challenge. It's just staying on top of things. So if anybody is listening to this who isn't already a farmer, if you're a farmer, you kind of know that. But if you're somebody who's like, I love avocados and now I want to be an avocado farmer, ask yourself about your time and your willingness to, put in 20 hours a day, 6 days a week, right? That would say that's my own biggest challenge, and it's not lemon or it's not citrus or avocado specific right now. It's just more of a farming issue.
Yeah, I was gonna say it. That sounds like definitely like a challenge in farming for a lot of farmers for sure. It's the time, and you mentioned labor too. I know that comes up a lot as well. But yeah, other folks, what have been your biggest challenges with these crops or in general? And
I think farmers have if it I think we have a tolerance for dealing with things that we cannot control.
Yeah.
Otherwise we wouldn't have signed up for this job. Um we can't control the weather, we can't control an international market, although maybe we could if we did work together. We can't control a poisonous political system, but maybe we could if we work together. Um Right now, I can't control an insect that's just decimating our avocado trees, which is called the avocado lace bug. But we're trying. We've tried 7 different things since July, and we're trying another thing. We did a drone release of lacewings, which was really fun. So if any of you are needing beneficial insects spread quickly, check out a company called Parabug, like parachute, but Parabug. And I just learned about them recently, and they did 50 acres in 2 hours, and it cost $500. So I was amazed. So that's a bright spot. That was today. So that's a reason to be cheerful. No, and I don't know. Things come and go. We work in these seasons. I feel like the seasons can also be the market has its seasons, and everything about what we do has its seasons. So, yeah. Thank God for the rain. For us, 5 years ago, we were looking at which part of the orchard do we take out first? That was the question. 5 years ago, because we didn't have enough water to irrigate all the trees. And now all the reservoirs are full. California is officially out of drought. So that's wonderful too.
Enjoy that.
I like your glasses half full attitude. From kind of just a smaller scale and being in Sonoma County, one of our challenges has been that nobody else sells local citrus and avocados at the markets, and we kept getting in trouble. There's like all this paperwork that we had to fill out, but nobody knew like where to get the paperwork, or nobody told us like that we had to fill out the paperwork. And like because of pests, like leaves aren't allowed to be harvested and with your fruit, and so no leaves can go to the farmer's market. So you have to sign a document confirming that you're not. Anyway, it's like a lot of little. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it felt like once a month last year, like at every market, we got in trouble because we didn't do something that they didn't tell us. They never told us we had to do. So there's a lot of like little things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the paperwork, broadly speaking, just feels like in the last 5 years that it has grown exponentially. I mean, I'll give you just a current example that I'm dealing with is Churchill Orchard is CCOF, and they came back in this year and wanted all sorts of different information for our organic OSP. And I farmed some other people's places that are organic certifiers, and organic certifiers asked us to resubmit new OSPs, organic systems plans, for all of their clients. And these are places that have never had any issues, and everything's above board in terms of their organicness. It's just somebody has decided that we should redo the paperwork in some standardized form that they have. The state has just changed how it's doing surface water recording, right? And that's like one more thing. And the paperwork is way harder. I think Robert put it well. We're accustomed and conditioned to dealing with the things we can't control, weather, markets, pests. That doesn't stress me out at all. County Ag Commissioner, the paperwork you're just describing about leaves or no leaves, the organic paperwork, reporting this, reporting that is making me bananas. And just because I have some UC people on this call, maybe you have the ears of policymakers, but we talk about needing farmers, and the farmers are getting old, and so much of the farming is going to these large corporations and kind of falling into the capital, right? The bankers and the Silicon Valley guys, throw their extra dough into farming. And we have less and less, and we have a need for small and independent farmers, but yet as a state and as a farming industry, we just keep piling more and more office work on it. And it sucks. That's the part that I hate the most. And that's the hardest challenge that I'm having at this moment. It's just the computer work. Okay, more soapbox. Yeah. Hey, thanks.
Yeah, that's why we're not certified organic. It's just not worth it at our scale for us to certify organic.
Yeah, and that's tough. That's not how it should. That's not how it should be. And I think between organic and some of the FSMA and food safety rules that you have to follow if you're selling in certain ways, I don't think I'm being cynical at all. I think I'm being clear-eyed when I say that though much of that is designed by larger, more powerful interests to put small growers and small ag out. And anyways, if anybody from Extension is listening to this and policymakers, et cetera, can please help us with that, because it's brutal.
Oh, thanks for saying that. Yeah, this is a thing I hear a lot from a lot of farmers, and it seems like it's kind of a universal experience right now. And I mean, I work, I think, exclusively with small farmers, so that's my clientele. Yeah. And I saw some people in the comments saying 100%, and I agree. So a lot of people, have that experience. It's hard for me to wrap my head around. I can't imagine it because, you want to be out there farming. But did you guys have other challenges you wanted to mention too? Like, I mean, Ben mentioned so many pests, which is good that we all, Ben, your presentation, the fact that you covered all those pests was so important so that everyone knows, like, hey, if you're going to plant these crops, you need to at least be aware of Phytophthora, verticillium wilt, ACP, and so on. So like that awareness is so essential. But there are quite a few of them. And I was just wondering, growers, have you encountered these pests? What do you do about them? Is there one that's the absolute worst? What challenges in the field, production challenges have been like the hardest?
We had a bit of a Phytophthora problem. Ellie, you saw it. We're on a hillside, and I think it was one infected tree, and the water ran down and infected a bunch of other trees. So it took out a couple of rows of our orchard, and we're going to have to replant, find some resistant rootstock and replant. We may have been overwatering, although I think it was mostly a winter water issue. But that's, we're still learning about irrigation and proper irrigation levels and how to deal with that as well. And that definitely seems really important in avocados, as Ben was saying.
Yeah, and real quick, Ben, did you say there was like maybe a rootstock or a small number of rootstocks that are resistant or at least tolerant to Phytophthora? Did I hear that right? Or like it sounds like maybe not.
Yes, they are tolerant. There's some that are better. There's definitely some that are better, and there's some that are worse. But it doesn't matter which one you have. Ben's totally right. If you irrigate incorrectly, doesn't matter what you do. You're right. If you're planting in a hillside where you kind of get a seasonal spring, it doesn't matter what rootstock you have because you're planting, in soggy ground. So, to your question about Phytophthora, it really does boil down to conditions on the ground and in irrigation. There are rootstock varieties that will be better. But I think to your question broadly about pests, there's a lot. I don't know enough about growing lettuce, but my sense from my garden is that there's a million pests for lettuce as well. And the pest issues they change where you are. If I'm closer to the coast, I worry more about thrips. If I'm a little more inland, I don't do anything for thrips on avocados because the heat in the summertime kills all the thrips. So it's really, this is such a site specific thing, especially when we're talking about Ventura, Santa Barbara counties and the North Bay. It's pests are always a thing in farming, and you guys will come up with something different that we haven't seen yet.
I think when things are going well, they're going well, and we don't get a lot of pests. And even if the pests are present, they don't inflict a lot of damage. And then when things are not going well, it's kind of a downward spiral, and it can be like, oh, well, not only do we have Phytophthora, now we have this bug that's eating the leaves, and now the snails are in the tree, and it's just goes and goes and goes. So, but I do think it goes back to 90% of it really is irrigation. And I think that we farm on many different kinds of soil types and in different microclimates, and our irrigation methods are they run the gamut. So you kind of have to learn the right way to irrigate for your individual place, whatever that is. You know, the trees do need a certain amount of gallons to survive, but how those gallons are put on, and knowing when enough is enough, it's important. We do use gypsum block tensiometers, which are measure electrical capacitance in the soil. And I think that has been invaluable for us to just pinpoint, okay, that's a trouble area, and that's why that's happening. It's kind of reassuring. And it can be a little bit eye-opening too, because you can also see when those things get wet. If you still have 6 hours to go on your irrigation block, and your sensors are already wet, you're throwing money away. So, so I would encourage people to just be careful with their water, and if you have a question, get these gypsum block. The electric ones are way better than the old pressure gauge ones.
That sounds like a great decision support tool. Thanks for mentioning that. Rebecca, did you have any challenges you wanted to mention too?
No, I mean, I think Ross talked about it. There's nothing else that I need to add. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have other decision support tools that you've used and have been helpful?
I think that our friends in Silicon Valley have gotten into ag, and they're going to sell you any number of remote monitoring, whether it's turning on pumps or closing valves or what have you from your cell phone. And there's a few instances where those can be good, but nothing beats getting out there and getting your feet or your boots on the ground and looking, putting your hand on the ground. You know, the soil moisture monitors that Robert is talking about, you can buy a system where you can check them remotely. It's fine. It's helpful if you're a manager and you have a lot of things to go look at. But there's something to having an experienced, thoughtful person go out there and look and touch the ground or look at the trees themselves. So I would think hard before just accepting whatever the sales guys are offering for, the latest and greatest way to farm. That's what I would say. But soil moisture monitoring generally is a great idea. And I can't recommend it enough. You absolutely have to do that in avocados. Baby avocados, you can drown them and you can dry them out really quickly. I have guys that work with me who've been farming for a long time, and they're outstanding avocado farmers. And even some of them, when it comes to a new planting of avocados, are terrible because guys get into habits, right? You know, okay, I turn on the water for 6 hours, 12 hours, whatever, right? And you got to go out there and you got to really see what's going on. Baby avocados in particular, but any baby tree is really sensitive to too much and too little. So soil moisture monitoring, but one that preferably requires you to go and look with your eyes, would be my decision support tool. That I wouldn't waste your money planting if you weren't going to do that.
I want to really second what you said about Silicon Valley selling us things. I worked in the vineyard industry up here for quite a while, and it is amazing the number of things that they want to sell you, and the number of I mean, yeah, nothing really beats just an experienced person going out there and looking, and yeah, that's all there is to it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for emphasizing that. Yeah. And hopefully that's an empowering thing at the end of the day that, your own eyes and experience go a long way. Okay, well, we have about 10 minutes left, believe it or not. And I just want to open it up. I have one more question, but I'm going to hold it. Does anyone from the audience have more questions for our grower panelists and also Ben, because he's still here? So you can unmute yourself, raise your hand, turn your video on, whatever you want to do, throw it in the chat. But yeah, this time's also for you. So please feel free to speak up if you want to ask them stuff.
I'm going to go first because I haven't talked enough. I want to go through a few of the things that Ben's presentation that I disagree with.
Oh yeah,
that I think need a little bit of context.
Go for it.
Reeds are a great piece of fruit. They are also, in my experience, the first variety to drop their fruit in a heat event. The Hass will hold on and they will look terrible. The reeds will look amazing, and you will go out 3 days later and the reeds will be on the ground and the Hass will be on the tree, but the tree will look like hell. So that's just context. Ben said cheap water in Ventura. I'd say compared to what?
San Diego.
Yeah, well, I know that's what you're comparing it to, but I don't think it's cheap. Kumquats are great. Why aren't there more of them out there? Because one person has to go out there and clip each individual kumquat. And if you're going to do that and you want to, and you can get it $15 a pound for them or whatever, then maybe. I'll say there's some varieties of kumquats that we don't see that if you, go to those collections and do your own research, there's some varieties of kumquats that it would be really fun if there were more of them out there. Ben mentioned that lemon picking down here 3 to 5 times. Yeah, that's how it used to be. Now we're lucky to get picked twice, and that's a longer discussion about the commercial commodity lemon market. But I actually think it's going to flip in 5 or 6 years. Pixies, yeah, they don't grow well in most places. Gold nugget is a killer piece of fruit. Don't ship it anywhere. If you want to grow gold nuggets and sell them within half an hour of where you are growing them or something like that, gold nugget, how do I describe this? I have a bunch of pixies. Churchill Orchard was the first place to plant pixies commercially. We have a pixie grower association down here. It's a thing. The last few years, the gold nuggets have been better. I can't sell a gold nugget outside of Ventura County, but it's a really nice piece of fruit. Sumos, $4 a piece. Yeah, go plant sumos to report back and tell me how it went. Ben, the chocolate was called Dubai chocolate. I don't think it's very good. Maybe there's a guy in Goleta making money on Star Rubies. A lot of other people saw the market pop a couple years ago when Texas had a freeze. They got excited. The market generally has come down on a commodity level. Oh, this is a good one. Ben said, don't fertilize new trees. I could not disagree with you more on young avocados. I would not over-fertilize them, but it is my very strong opinion, especially in the variety of gem, that these trees are being grown in a commercial nursery, and it's essentially, think about it as a tree having a, what's the word? Having the thing you get in the hospital. IV, thank you. They have an IV, and those guys get them every single nutrient and every single thing they want exactly when they want it perfectly. And now you're going to go put them out in the wild. I think that people who have not fertilized baby avocados when they're little babies, you can overdo it for sure, but I kind of fundamentally disagree with the statement, don't fertilize new trees. He didn't say anything about it, but there was a note on his slide about mandarins and it said don't prune mandarins. Maybe that's needs more discussion, but anyways, I would absolutely prune mandarins. They turn into a mess if you don't. So thank you for letting me respond to Ben's presentation.
Of course. So Ben, would you like to say anything?
Well, you know, this is an experienced grower, and I'm called in not to deal with people that are not having, I get called in for problems, and I see these problems of overwatering, over fertilizing, you know, so, you know, if you're, you know, going down the middle of the road and, you know, being nominal about what you do, yeah, that's fine. But, you know, but, you know, the idea that, you know, sumos don't do well along the coast. Yeah, I mean, all these citrus varieties have their place somewhere in California, and you know, really just don't go by what somebody says. In Tulare, you got to, you know
Never.
in Sonoma. And we developed blueberries here. I don't know, 30 years ago, and Mike says, you know, the bigger the blueberry, the cheaper it is to produce, because little blueberries are, you know, there's a lot of and that's true of kumquats. You know, it's a small piece of fruit and takes as much wrist action to do one piece of small fruit as it does to do a big piece of fruit. So, yeah, there's an economics to the labor. I'm going to be talking with a guy from Israel tomorrow, who's got a machine that can machine harvest blueberries. That's going to be something to, I don't know, at some point we're going to have to mechanize a lot of this stuff if we're going to continue growing this stuff.
Okay, thanks, guys. In the last couple of minutes, do we have more questions from the audience? Okay, well, while we wait for people, interrupt me if you think of one. But my last question was just, what are the biggest benefits of growing these crops? What do you love about them? What's your motivation to keep doing it? Yeah, whoever wants to take that question.
I want to second something Rebecca said a while ago about, as we are mainly field crop growers, about the timing of especially the citrus. You know, having something to pick in the winter and spring is fantastic. You know, we can't get into the field, and we really have a low ebb in our financial, in our income stream, and you know, March, April, May, and having stuff to fill that gap is really incredible. So that's a huge benefit.
Nice, thanks, Ross. Robert?
Yeah, back to like knowing things and not knowing things. I think it's actually a really nice place to be where we are learning. So Mike and Ben can disagree, and I think that's beautiful. So keep it up. We don't know everything there is to know about these crops. I think avocados are super fun to grow because maybe like Ben said, it's wild. It hasn't been cultivated for 5,000 years. We don't know the recipe to pump out 20,000 pounds per acre year after year. We're figuring it out. We're trying, but I think for me that's kind of what makes it fun is that there's opportunity for growth, and that means there's opportunity for learning.
Yeah, and great conversations and discussion. Good point.
What do I like about it? I like growing and selling or giving things to people that stoke them out. I like to grow for quality. You know, I'm responsible for some lemons. And you give a person a box of lemons, and if they're making lemonade, they're excited, but nobody's ever like, oh my God, thank you, those are the best lemons I've ever had. So like growing lemons for me is like, okay. Would you give somebody a Washington navel that's done correctly? And a Washington navel is an amazing piece of fruit if you treat it correctly. You don't treat it the way the industry treats it. And you give that to somebody and you see them light up and they ask you about it and they're like, oh my God, that's an orange. That's the thing that like, when I'm stressed about whatever BS is going on, that's like, yeah, that's sort of the thing that carries me through is stoking people out on really good food. So
And I agree. That's what I was going to say is when we bring avocados to the market and the reaction from the customers is so overwhelmingly positive because nobody else has local avocados and people are really interested in the varieties and they want to learn more and they come back the next week and they talk about how good it was and
Yep.
it's a good feeling and it's really nice. Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why I farm is like building that community and feeding people. It all like it's like the web of life, it all kind of circles back and makes you feel good about what you're doing.
Yep.
Oh, really well said. Well, thank you all for doing what you do because it's a huge deal. It's such a huge deal, and we really all appreciate it so much. The food that you're growing and feeding us, but also thank you all for just being here today. And there's some really nice comments in the chat about just, yeah, how you guys have been so generous with your knowledge and experience and contributions. So just thank you guys so much for being willing to just talk about this stuff. It's really, really, really helpful. So yeah, it's oh my gosh, it's 4:31. Okay, before people start leaving, really quick, I have a very short survey that is in the chat. I promise it's really fast. It takes you maybe a minute or two, and this is just an evaluation form for this webinar so that you can give me feedback. Let me know if you learned something. There's a little comment section too where you can type out like specific things you liked or specific things you want to see done differently next time. And if you have ideas for other webinars, maybe there's other crops that you want to see. I've done webinars like this for peaches and table grapes and all kinds of other things. But yeah, please let me know what you'd like me to do in the future. And
can I add one last quick thing?
Yeah, of course.
Is that I really like the North Bay, like a lot. And so if you reach out and offer to buy me dinner, like maybe I'll come look at your avocados for you. And then we can get really weird in person because yeah, that's farm field trips are fun. So the people I can't see out there, then hit us up.
Thank you so much for offering that. That is super nice. And I see there's an issue with the survey. I'll just send it out via email. I'll figure it out and send it out in an email if that doesn't work. But yeah, thank you so much, Mike. That'd be great. I feel like we have a lot of farmers here who are just curious about these crops in particular and what's possible. And for any presenters who are willing, no pressure at all, but feel free to put your contact info in the chat or share it with me and I can send it out in the follow-up email. Either way or both is great. So that, yeah, for folks who want to take you up on that, they can. And yeah, I will be sending, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say thank you. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Oh gosh, I mean, I really appreciate you, Ross and Rebecca, for being here too, because you're our people in the North Bay who are doing this. I mean, yeah, like Robert was saying, there's a lot that we're all learning, but especially in our region, you guys are really, trailblazing as far as I'm concerned. So thanks for being here and sharing that. Okay, cool. I see a lot of emails. That's great in the chat. And I am going to send a follow-up email with a lot of info, links to stuff that we talked about, the recording of this webinar, the eval link and all that good stuff. So everyone should be receiving that in the next day or two. Have to edit the video a little bit. Okay, any last comments or thoughts? All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon and evening. And yeah, we'll definitely be in touch. Thanks
Okay,
again.
thanks.
Okay, bye. Take care.